In a world where your class decides your future, Lin Tianhao awakened the weakest one of all. Summoner, laughed at and cast aside, he thought his life was already over. But then an ancient system awakened inside him, opening the gates to the abyss itself. Now every sacrifice makes his demonic army stronger, and every battle brings him one step closer to absolute power. Can the world's weakest class become the greatest nightmare this world has ever seen? 1,000 years ago, monsters from the Black Abyss invaded the world. It was then that the obelisks appeared, giving humanity hope for survival. Since then, humans have drawn power from the obelisks, allowing them to fight the monsters on equal terms. After numerous battles and strength increases, humanity finally managed to push the monsters back into the abyss and preserve their lands. People built their capitals near the obelisks, where, at an annual awakening ceremony, they select new fighters capable of withstanding the abyss. But the monsters still operate from the shadows. To defeat them completely, they still need the strength of the young. The school teacher delivered this speech at the 53rd awakening ceremony near the obelisk of Lingtian City. A crowd of students had gathered there to participate in the awakening ceremony. The teacher warned them that everything would soon begin. Soon the obelisk would assign them to classes based on their individual talents. And it doesn't matter whether they awakened as a fighter or a craftsman, they still have to contribute to Huaguo. One of the disciples exhaled. After 18 years of cramming, he could finally awaken. His friend hoped he'd get the warrior class, so he could immediately join the guild and earn a salary without straining himself. He chuckled and asked, did he think becoming a fighter was easy? Did he know that only 50% of them successfully transitioned to martial classes? He smiled awkwardly, and their friend told them to look at Lin Tianhao. It was time for him to awaken, but he was still sleeping. He was their biggest loser. At best, he would have gotten a craftsman class, and that would have been lucky. The guy laughed and said that only one class would suit him, the most trashy one, Beast Tamer. Tianhao opened his eyes and looked resolutely at the obelisk, thinking that he had finally lived to awaken. Even though he had arrived in this world in a strange way, he wondered what kind of person he would awaken as. He was the worst student in his class at Lintian High School. The guy approached him and asked him what he wanted to become, to which he replied, of course, his goal is an S class or some hidden class. The guy laughed and turned to his friends, asking if they had heard that. The last one on the list dreams of an S-class and a hidden class. They also laughed and said that with such indicators, he was a failure in life. He should at least have reached some kind of craft class. And they were right. His last potential assessment was C-class. But who said that dirt can't become a prince? Since he had arrived in this world, maybe a miracle would happen. He just hoped he would get a normal class. The teacher told the students to prepare to go up to the stage for awakening. Wandong was the first to be called. He walked onto the stage and cast a thoughtful glance at Tianhao, telling him to watch carefully how cool he was becoming. The teacher said the awakening process lasts about 5 seconds. If he feels unwell, that's normal. He just needs to be patient. Wandong touched the obelisk. Light radiated from his hand in waves, and the teacher joyfully said that, by the command of the holy light, the awakening was complete. He had become a warrior. He was very happy, but when he saw his rank, he was slightly disappointed. The teacher said that rank C is already above average. She hopes he will become a worthy warrior. He should report to the guild center of Lintian City as soon as possible. They will explain everything he needs there. He thanked her, and the girls squealed with delight. How handsome he is. He won't forget about them and will take them with him on raids, will he? A warrior is a stable profession, a real gravy train. He walked back to the crowd, waving at the girls, and bumped into Tianhao, smirking as he said that he was their underachiever. The MC thought, Wandong, as usual, never misses an opportunity to make fun of him. He was so sick of him. His friends crowded around him and asked why he was frowning so much. He should put on a simpler face. Wandong spread his arms out to the sides and offered his friends to go to a bar at his expense. He was in a good mood today, and didn't want some losers to ruin it. Tianhao thought, what kind of complexes do they have to take it out on him like that? But no matter, it's time for him to learn his own class. They passed by him, and the guy glanced at Tianhao, saying that he was afraid to imagine what kind of crap their poor guy would get. His friend asked if he cared. In any case, he was no match for them. The main thing was to stick with Wandong, and they would be fine. The guy agreed with him. Even if he'd gotten an S rank, he'd have ruined everything anyway. Tianhao was called onto the stage. He emerged from the crowd, and when he approached the obelisk, thought that any class would do, as long as it was a combat class. Even a mage or a support class would do. He prayed, then touched the obelisk and a powerful wave of light erupted from it. MC was already overjoyed. Maybe he'd finally stop being a loser. Even the teachers thought so. As soon as the light died down, the teacher sighed heavily and said, no matter what happens, he shouldn't worry. That's fate. He should prepare himself mentally. His class is a summoner. MC was upset, and the other students laughed at him. It was that same worthless class, the worst of all. Even though it's considered a combat class, but summoning is expensive and the effectiveness is so-so, a typical trash class. Poor Tianhao, he got a class even worse than a craftsman. Now life will definitely be hard. Suddenly, MC heard a voice in his head saying, awakening detected in owner. Binding, status, Lord of the Abyss. He can receive 1 random SSS class talent for every 10 levels. He was very surprised. He couldn't even imagine this. So by level 100, he will have 10 SSS class talents. After that, the teacher handed him a card, and the system said, SSS class talent selection is in progress. He received Demon Sacrifice. By sacrificing maximum health, which does not regenerate, you can instantly level up a summoned creature and demonize it, bestowing the power of hell itself. The demonized creature can still gain experience and level up in battle. He thought, the constant loss of maximum health is certainly a serious price. But the summoner himself doesn't necessarily need to engage in battle. The main thing is that the summons are strong. So, he just needs to collect equipment that only increases his health. The system gave him a hint. Every 100 points of maximum health gives him an additional summoning level. He thought that he currently had 1000 health points. If he kept at least 100 for himself, it meant he could immediately raise his summoning to at least level 9. Although it was still not worth the risk, he needed to use it carefully. The teacher smiled awkwardly and told him not to be upset. Even if the class was unsuccessful, there were always other paths in life. He thanked her for her concern, but he believed that everything would work out. She touched his shoulder and said it was good that he thought so. It was a shame, of course, that it turned out this way. A girl from the crowd laughingly said that if he was a summoner, perhaps he should think about a different future. But Tianhao wasn't upset. Usually, once you become a summoner, nothing will happen to you. But he would become the greatest summoner in this world. A few hours later, he returned home. His sister had just gotten out of the shower and showed up in a towel, eagerly asking him about the awakening ceremony. When he told her he had become a summoner, she became upset and asked, "Is that the class considered useless?" He confirmed this and dried her hair, and she told him not to worry. It was her turn to awaken next year. She would become a mage and protect him. His gaze fell downwards. He became embarrassed and threw the towel right in her face, saying, "Her brother summoner will still show what he is capable of. Let her just take care of herself, and that's all." She removed the towel and indignantly exclaimed that he was teasing her again, and he told her to give him some time alone. Let her play here for now. She drawled his name with displeasure, noticing that he was treating her like a child again, and he went to his room, reading the messages in the chat. The homeroom teacher asked all the students who had successfully awakened to gather in a preparatory group. He decided to go and see what was going on. They were all gathered in a large auditorium, and the teacher said that this time, the awakening results were quite good. 5 were assigned to the warrior class, 8 to the mage class, and 11 to the support class, and 1 became a summoner. Wandong laughed and said, "A trash class for biogarbage. Quite fair." His friend said that if he had been assigned that, he would have jumped out the window. The teacher said that Tianhao's situation was special. He had this book on summoning for beginners. It should help him. He took it and told him to come to him if he had any difficulties. Taking the book, MC smiled wryly. The book was quite dusty. It looked like summoners really were among the last ones here. He returned to his seat, and the teacher said that they had been gathered here today so that the school administration could collect accurate data on those who had successfully passed the awakening. Everyone who has awakened must be present, so they shouldn't disgrace him. Now they will move on to testing. The teacher was already waiting for them there. He ordered the testing to begin, and the mage was the first to go. He struck with a power of 73, a good result. After that, it was Wandong's turn. He struck with his sword with a power of 89, and the teacher praised him, saying that he would be the best this year. Next, Tianhao approached the power reading device and thought that the book the teacher gave him really did describe the basic summoning skill, but he had never tried it yet. He opened the book and hoped for a miracle, after which he cast a spell, and powerful currents of wind swirled around him, making everyone doubt that the summoner was a trash class. Dust filled the entire area. They all froze in anticipation, but after such a spectacular spell, only a slime appeared. MC stared in shock, and the students laughed. So much noise, and in the end it's a slime? It's so cute. Is he sure it can even fight? Someone else said that any monster would probably smear this slime with snot. The most it can do is clean floors. Tianhao himself was a bit perplexed. The slime climbed onto his leg, and he saw the stats of this formidable beast. Only 9 attack points. MC said discontentedly that tickling alone would do more, which upset the monster, and the teacher ordered everyone laughing to shut their mouths and look at the test results first. The device measured its strength at only 9 points, which even the teacher felt uneasy. He awkwardly told Tianhao not to be upset. 9 is still a mark. The others laughed, and he decisively asked the teacher if he could try again. He agreed, and then he decided to use his new talent, Demon Sacrifice. The system warned him that after the sacrifice, the summoned creature would be permanently demonized and would receive a level up. He agreed and, to start with, decided to spend 200 health points as a test. He was fiddling around with the system window for a long time, and someone asked why he was hesitating. He could repeat the test until he died, but it wouldn't help him anyway. As soon as MC spent 200 health points, demonic energy streams pierced the slime, and its appearance began to slowly change, turning into a monster. Everyone's mouths dropped open in shock. No one had seen anything like this before. The cute slime eventually turned into a demonic one, and its stats increased significantly. He ordered the monster to attack. It leaped up and struck the strength tester with all its might. The numbers began to change rapidly. Everyone held their breath, and then what they saw shocked them. Its damage was 120 points. One of the students grabbed his head and exclaimed, "This can't be true? Is this trash really that strong?" Even Wan Dong only had 89 points, and this loser had gone beyond 100. Wan Dong was shocked. How could this worthless individual have a higher score than him? Even the Huaxia warlord Fang Changyun had only gotten a 101, while Tianhao got 120. He said he'd taken the test twice, so he must have done something to the machine the second time. The others agreed with him. There had to be cheating. He'd started with a 9, and then suddenly got a 120. This was nonsense. Something was definitely fishy. MC thought, he did do something, but he definitely hadn't done anything to the machine. He'd only boosted his slime's stats. The teacher pointed out that the students were right, then went to the machine, and Tianhao said he hadn't cheated. The man carefully examined the device, stared at the malfunctioning screen, and paused for a moment before waving his hand and declaring that the equipment had indeed malfunctioned, and MC hadn't cheated. Wan Dong chuckled and thought, of course, the equipment is broken. How can such a worthless person get around it? He asked the teacher, if the equipment is broken, then what about Tianhao's result? Another student said that he should count the 9 points. The equipment worked fine the first time. They saw everything. The others agreed with him, but the teacher decided otherwise. He told Tianhao that his result was annulled. He would take the test again later. MC was surprised that he was giving him a second chance, and the students began to complain. They saw with their own eyes that he had 9 points. The teacher must be fair, otherwise it looked like he was covering for him. He told them to shut up. He himself would decide what to do. Since the equipment was broken, that was all for the test for today. Those who hadn't passed it yet, including Tianhao, would come back later when the equipment was repaired. One of the students cursed, but one stern look from Wan Dong was enough to shut him up. He approached Tianhao and said that even if he retakes the test, the result is the same. A chicken can't become a phoenix. He told his friends to ignore this worthless idiot and instead go to the black abyss of the first level. MC wondered if this was a starting dungeon. This would suit him. He'd just test his slime demon's capabilities. He followed the guys, after which the repair crew arrived. The man looked over the machine and asked, did the students break it like that? Such power, could it be that they have another genius in their school? Tianhao, meanwhile, approached the gate. Suddenly, Old Man Fang called out to him and said, he has a good build, excellent potential for a summoner. He mentally noticed that this phrase sounded suspiciously familiar and asked, is this him? The old man said he had a top-of-the-line summoner's staff and would sell it for only 300 gold. Was he interested? MC asked in shock. 300 gold for this piece of wood? He was a robber, after all. The old man said he was actually offering it to him for 300 out of the kindness of his heart. He wouldn't sell it to anyone else, even for 3,000. Tianhao took it and immediately felt the staff truly radiating power. There wasn't even an association for summoners in this world. The equipment was rare, so it was worth taking. He decided to take it, and Old Man Fang reminded him of the 300 gold price. MC reached into his wallet and found only 92 coins. He smiled awkwardly and asked if he could take it at a discount for 92 gold. The old man muttered with displeasure, oh, these twists of fate. He snatched the coins from his hands and said, very well, he'll take this as a deposit. Tianhao was surprised. He had expected something different, and the old man said that 92 gold was only for him, not to sell the stick to someone else. He wants to buy it? Then let him go to the deepest part of the level 1 black abyss and bring him one valuable item from there. And then the stick is his. MC was indignant and wondered if this was an NPC quest. The old man gave him a note and said that when he reached the depths, he would understand everything himself. He suddenly grabbed his hand to put his fingerprint on the IOU, and he nervously exclaimed, isn't this too aggressive a sale? His fingerprint was already on the IOU. The old man told him to stop being indignant and go there quickly. The main thing is that he doesn't forget about the deal. A very upset Tianhao trudged towards the abyss. At that very moment, his class teacher approached the old man and called him Elder Fang, asking what he was doing here. Today, the equipment broke down and the test was cancelled. Maybe he should go back. The old man pointed at Tianhao and asked if he knew that student. The man told him about him, a boy with a difficult fate, a summoner, apparently, whose path would be difficult. The old man agreed. After some time, MC reached the entrance to the abyss, the cold valley. On a large platform in the middle of the mountain stood a rift, the very entrance. Tianhao quickly looked up the information about this place. The Black Abyss, Level 1, also known as the Cold Valley, requires a group of 3 to 5 people, and the level limit is 1 to 10. If you try to enter above the allowed level, you will be eliminated by the Overseer. He sighed heavily. The minimum number of participants in a team is 3, meaning it's impossible to get through solo. He opened the rankings. If you finish on the list at the end of the month, you can receive a generous reward. Fang Changyun was in first place. He received the newbie's MC's golden chest armor as a reward, a powerful starting item that gives 120 points to his maximum health. And since his skill recommends having a huge amount of health, he should fight for such a reward. Wandong called out to him and asked why a loser came here. Was he hoping to pass the Black Abyss? Had he even looked at himself? He wouldn't even survive 10 seconds there. MC thought, don't they have a life of their own? Wandong told him to go plant radishes on the farm, and he in turn advised them to watch themselves better. His friend Zhang Yunfei chuckled and said, at least 3 people are needed to enter the abyss. He should actually go there first, and then they can talk. After that, Wandong raised his hand and said that he was a C-class warrior, and he had 2 E-class mages on his team. Who wants to join them? Everyone immediately rushed to him, asking them to take him on the team. He quickly picked a couple of people at random and headed for the rift. Judging by the excitement, the C-classes are already respected and admired here. They even plan to take first place in the rankings for the fastest time to complete the rift. As they were about to enter, Bones ejected from the portal, and everyone was horrified, except for Wandong and his friend. Yunfei told the new team members to keep up, 1 step to the side, and they would die. After that, they confidently entered the abyss, and Tianhao thought that Wandong and his duo were real jerks. Those 2 definitely won't make it out alive. Yes, death isn't permanent, but the price for resurrection is also hefty. It's better to go through everything without dying. That's the ideal option. He put his stats on display, and of course, everyone immediately fell for his S rank, but as soon as they saw his class, they immediately changed their minds, and no one wanted to join his team. He noticed Li Shui, a female bard with an E-rank talent, among the crowd. It's a shame, but this class's team buffs only start working at D-rank. MC noted, judging by her appearance, it looks like she's been waiting for someone for several days. He approached her and offered to join their team, which surprised her greatly. She never thought anyone would even say that to her. He extended his hand with a smile and said that he wanted to compete for the rating, but no one would take him on a team. Wouldn't she like to go with him? She thought. An S-class summoner wants to get into the rankings? It's impossible. Although he's so handsome, it would be a shame to miss such a chance. She shook his hand and they introduced themselves to each other and formed a group. He said that when they entered, he would take care of clearing the monsters and she should just try not to expose herself. She was very happy and asked if he was worried about her. She would try to protect herself and not cause him problems. Now they needed to find one more person. At that moment, that same Su Qinger, the local beauty, the cold goddess, the queen of the school, appeared at the entrance. All the guys started drooling over her and tried to invite her to their team. But in vain, this only irritated her. Tianhao looked at her somehow sullenly. She turned sharply to him and thought, isn't he that Tianhao, the worst one from their school? Did he really become a summoner? Summoner is a trash class. If she joins his team, everyone will leave her alone. He got a little nervous because she was staring at him, and then she suddenly turned on her sweet side and ordered him to immediately put her on the team. The guys were furious and shocked, and MC was simply confused. Qinger poked him in the chest and said that she was talking to him specifically. The guys grabbed their heads and started tearing their hair, asking why a goddess wants to join some trash summoner. Tianhao was a little upset, because now he would be hated even more. Qinger turned to the guys irritably and asked, can't they see that she is already on the team? Let them get out of here while she is nice. After that, she went to the rift and told the 2 to follow her and quickly, because she still has a lot of plans for today. The MC stopped her and asked why she'd even decided to join them. She firmly told him that if she wanted to get into the rankings, she needed 2 dummies. With their help, she'd take first place and no one would dare humiliate her anymore. They remarked that it was a bit rude, after which she asked with displeasure, why are they standing there? Tianhao winced, thinking the process would be difficult, and Li Shui asked doubtfully, so there would only be 3 of them? The MC replied that there were no other suitable people right now. If it became dangerous, she should disengage from the battle and simply retreat. After passing through the portal, they found themselves in a winter region, and Qinger noted that it was quite cold here. Tianhao agreed with her. The cold was terribly cold, and the warm clothes he'd bought weren't helping at all. Li Shui hesitantly said that she could create a basic protective aura against the cold, and played a few notes on the lyre. They instantly felt warm, and Qinger even praised her. They continued on, and MC said, since they've decided to fight for a place in the rankings, then they need to hurry. Very soon they encountered their first monster, a rotten wandering wolf. Imprisoned in the depths of a cold valley, the beast's soul, deprived of peace, found refuge in a decayed body, wandering among the ice, driven by eternal torment. Its only skills are spreading plague and weakening howl. Qinger stepped forward and said with a grin that this wolf appeared just in time, an excellent option for a warm-up. She took the form of a beast, a cat spirit, which caused her to get on all fours, and Tianhao was surprised. They had never seen the druid class in action before. Qinger rushed to attack and the wolf rushed towards her. She deftly and quickly delivered several blows, each one stronger than the last. MC thought, the damage accumulates, meaning her claws leave a bleeding effect. Li Shui was delighted with her skills, and when Qinger received a reward for defeating a monster, a wolf pelt and a wolf fang worth a total of 30 coins, she gave it to the bard as thanks for the cold protection charm, as she doesn't like to be in debt. The girl was very happy, and then they continued on. On the way, they encountered 3 more wolves. Chinger ran towards them, quickly dealt with them all in one go, and, noticing a wound on her shoulder, thought in surprise, 3 at once? It was still a bit difficult for her to handle, but she should take first place in the rankings. Li Shay approached her worriedly and told her to wait a bit. She would cast an initial health restore on her. Chinger said her buff was worthless, so she should conserve her mana. Instead, she drank the potion and healed all her wounds at once. This made Li Shay a little upset, but Tianhao quickly cheered her up. They continued walking, constantly looking around for monsters, and Chinger accidentally fell into a magic trap. As soon as the magic circle activated, someone's huge hammer flew at her. Luckily, she managed to jump back, otherwise she would have been crushed. They were attacked by an elite monster, a rotten, undead guardian. Once the master of the pack, it is now only a rotting guardian who, having lost his mind, still fiercely protects the territory, obeying instincts that have survived even death. Chinger became nervous, as she understood that this monster would definitely be troublesome, and Li Shay asked why the elite monster was here. MC guessed that Chinger killed too many rotten wolves and thereby lured it out. At that very moment, the undead creature pounced on her and swung its hammer, sending her flying. She hit the rocks with a loud thud and didn't move. Li Shay was frightened and asked Tianhao what they should do. They needed to save her. The monster headed toward Chinger, raising its hammer above its head. At that moment, MC summoned a demonic slime and commanded it to use its demon dance skill. The slime took off, rushing toward the monster in lightning speed, and before it could strike, it grabbed Chinger and carried her away. The impact roared, and the undead creature was surprised to see she was gone. During that time, the slime had managed to carry her to the team. MC told Li Shay to take Chinger aside and cast a recovery spell on her. He would take on this elite zombie. The monster rushed towards them. Tianhao gave the slime an order, and it leaped high into the air and hurled chunks of slime at him. As soon as the monster was covered in slime, the slime used Demon Dance and quickly dodged the blow. MC noted that its defense was too high, the damage was only half dealt, and they needed to find another way. Suddenly, the monster screamed loudly, and all because the slime had begun to corrode its skin. Now Tianhao knew what slime was capable of, and when the corpse ran towards them, he ordered the slime to use Demon Dance in a highly corrosive slime, targeting the ankles. The slime followed his instructions, hitting the monster's ankles, causing it to immediately freeze in place and fall. All this time, Li Shay was healing Chinger, and she lay there and watched Tianhao fight. MC thought that was a good thing. His lower body is less protected than his upper body. He ordered the slime to hit his legs again. The slime charged, showering the corpse with a rain of slime, and when his entire body was covered in it, it melted to the bone. That's how Tianhao killed the elite monster, his level immediately rising to 3rd. He was surprised that he was given so much experience. It was probably because he defeated a monster of a higher level. Li Shay was surprised. He killed it with one blow. Were the summons really that strong? Chinger noted that it wasn't the summons, but Tianhao himself. He single-handedly finished off the elite monster, and his tactics and instincts were perfect. He was terribly smart. Suddenly, his face appeared in front of her, which made her embarrassed, and he asked if she was okay. She looked away, saying that she only had a couple of scratches, nothing serious, and Li Shay noted that her healing was too slow. She needed to stop and recover, but Chinger objected. They were fighting for the top spot in the rankings. Now was not the time to rest. She could continue the fight, they just needed to move on. She barely got up. As soon as she took one step, her legs began to tremble and she almost fell. But MC caught her and asked, "What's the point of rankings if she dies?" She was captivated by his beauty, and on his advice decided to take a little rest. There was a cave marked on the map. They would stop there for the night. As soon as they settled in, Tianhao told the girls to rest, and he would go scout. Li Shay didn't object and immediately went to bed, as she was very tired from using up all her mana. Literally a second later, she began snoring, and Chinger smiled wryly. MC told her to get some sleep too, and he'd go and look around. Before he left, she thanked him for saving her, and he gave her a strange look, which made her even more embarrassed and exclaim, "Why is he staring at her like that? She wasn't some ungrateful fool." After that, she turned away from him and went to bed, asking him to forget about what she just said. He walked to the cave exit and said with a smile, "That's true, a razor-sharp tongue and a soft soul." She took one last look at him before falling asleep, and he left the cave and thought that since he killed the elite monster, he had increased his levels by 2. Now he should look at his stats. His stats had increased significantly. Most importantly, his health had increased from 800 to 1200. He'd also been given a new skill, Full Armament. The spiritual power of Till's summoning empowers summoned creatures, increasing all stats. He smiled and noted that this skill wasn't bad. It essentially provided a boost, just like a buff. Since he'd gained 400 health, he'd be able to raise the slime by 4 levels, but he should have found other ways to increase its maximum health. He spent 400 health on his monster, and the slime's stats immediately increased. Plus, it gained a new skill, Split. He was curious about the difference between the copy and the original, so he decided to test it out right away. The slime understood his intentions and retreated to a safe distance, and as soon as Tianhao gave the command, the monster split in 2. Now, there were 2 slimes, and their stats were also divided equally. He glanced at the status window and wondered how long this effect would last, and immediately afterward, a timer appeared above the slime's head. Only 3 minutes. He was even surprised, because he thought there was little he could do in 3 minutes, and suddenly a scream came from the cave. He immediately ran back, thinking they were in danger, and so it turned out. It turned out that a huge, mutated rabbit had wandered towards them. Li Shay was doing most of the screaming, while Ching'er was ready to attack the monster at any moment. MC ran up to them and ordered his slime to use the slime spit skill, but it turned out to be completely useless. This only attracted the monster's attention. It is a giant snow rabbit of level 8, a strange humanoid creature. It has the head and body of a rabbit, but walks on 2 legs. It constantly lives in the cold, which is why it has acquired thick skin. It is able to block basic attacks. Seeing his level, everyone became very nervous. There was a 6-level difference between them, so they had no chance. The rabbit growled loudly and rushed to attack, and Ching'er warned Tianhao of the danger, but he wasn't afraid. It was just some rabbit. The slime opened fire on the rabbit, but it was not only agile but also smart. It spun around, scattering clumps of slime in all directions, then approached the slime and kicked it, throwing it aside. He quickly caught up with it, grabbed it, and then slammed it into the ground. The poor slime was kicked around the entire cave, and MC finally ordered it to retreat, using Demon Dance and a highly corrosive slime to do so. Having escaped the monster's grip, the slime rushed toward its owner and began moving in a zigzag pattern, trying to block the rabbit's path so that it would step on the slime and have its legs corroded. The girls were surprised. What kind of monster was this? And why was it so fast? Ching'er told him it was one of the most dangerous monsters in the Cold Valley, a giant snow rabbit. Many squads had already died at its paws, but they hadn't entered its territory. Why did it attack them? Li Shay noticed that the slime couldn't hit it. It was simply dodging attacks. Maybe they should intervene and help. Tianhao became nervous. He knew things were really bad, and the demon dance was still on cooldown. He ordered the slime to return quickly, but every time it tried to distance itself from the rabbit, he caught up and struck it several times. Li Shay became very worried. She rushed to help and picked up a stone. Ching'er tried to stop it, but before she could, the girl had already thrown the stone straight at the rabbit, hitting it in the head. The rabbit slowly turned its head in her direction, and she flinched, probably realizing that this decision hadn't been very well thought out. He headed toward her, and she screamed in fear and reached into her bag, throwing the first thing she could find at him. Luckily, it turned out to be a carrot, which the local rabbits really love. He immediately stopped and started eating, causing their jaws to drop in shock. It turned out he was simply hungry. Ching'er asked why Li Shay was carrying carrots at all, to which she replied that they were their travel rations. After finishing, the rabbit turned to them with a ferocious glare, and then Li Shay took off running, scattering carrots behind her to distract him. But MC knew they were about to run out of carrots, so they needed to somehow pin him down and finish him off. He called out to Li Shay and asked her to throw her backpack to Ching'er. She immediately did so, and taken aback, clumsily caught it, causing the rabbit's attention to immediately shift to her. She transformed into her cat form and cautiously asked Tianhao what he was up to. She then dodged the rabbit's attack, causing MC to ask, "Isn't it obvious?" He was going to kill him. The rabbit became furious because he couldn't catch her, but she dodged again and remarked that he was quite fast. She called out to Tianhao and asked if he would be there soon. He pointed to the wall and asked her to lure him there. Now she understood his plan and quickly ran there. The rabbit chased after her, and she reached the wall, waited for the right moment, and then abruptly jumped aside, causing the monster to crash into the wall and have a stone fall on his head. It was the slime's turn. It jumped up and sprayed slime everywhere, causing the rabbit to run, and MC grinned as he noticed he'd been caught. On Tianhao's command, the slime split in 2 and surrounded the enemy, shocking him, to say the least. Finally, the slime could take revenge. A few hits, and the rabbit would be done. Seeing the monster's destruction notification, MC breathed a sigh of relief, then recalled the slime, thinking that it was just a level 6 snow rabbit, and the slime had had such a hard time dealing with it. Right now, it mostly has area of effect skills, making it practically useless against single enemies. If they encounter an enemy like this rabbit again, things will be bad. He was interrupted by the girls. Li Shay said they finally took him down. She'd thought they were all screwed. Ching'er was indignant that he dared to use her as bait, and he apologized to her for it. It's just that out of all of them, she was the only one who could match his speed. She blushed and remarked that he knew how to get out of a situation gracefully, then turned to Li Shay in a rage and exclaimed, "This is all because of her. Who would even think of dragging a carrot into the abyss? Because of her, they almost got killed." She guiltily said that she just wanted to take something to chew on. She asked, who would chew on a carrot anyway? Let her immediately put it all in her spatial inventory. She had just started putting the weight in her bag, but Tianhao stopped her and said, "Killing 1 snow rabbit gives 120 experience. So far, this is the highest amount of all the monsters encountered. If they manage to lure more rabbits, they will be able to level up very quickly." To get through the Cold Valley, you need to defeat a level 10 boss, and to defeat the boss, the whole team must be at least level 4. They are currently level 2, he is level 3, and to get everyone to level 4, they need to kill at least 5 snow rabbits. Li Shay said that they had problems even with one. Will they be able to cope if they lure more? He told her not to worry. Last time they were prey, and this time they are hunters. Chinger agreed with him. By the way, she plans to get to the top. She doesn't have time to run around and look for mobs, and here they are coming to them, just what she needs. She suggested that they quickly think of a plan, and then they got down to business. There was a carrot lying by the rock at the entrance to the cave. A passing rabbit noticed it and came closer. Then they jumped out from behind the rock and attacked it. 3 hours had passed, so they had risen to level 5, or rather only Tianhao, and they were at level 4. The system notified them that 5 hours had passed since entering the Cold Valley, and Li Shay said that in all that time they had already reached level 4, which is fast. Xinger agreed with her. As far as she remembered, the record holder, Fang Changjun, took a full 8 hours. Li Shay was very happy and asked, "So, they can break the record?" She answered that it wasn't that easy. Does she think the final boss will just stand there? MC agreed with her. The guide says the boss is the leader of the Walking Dead. He can summon rotten wolves and regular zombies. He's not difficult in himself, but the fight is protracted. In their current state, the fight will take about 2 hours. Li Shay asked what they should do then, and Chinger suggested they first rest and get themselves in order. She went into the cave, and Tianhao said she was right. They should rest for at least 30 minutes. They sat around the fire. MC leveled up the slime and thought that with each level, the increase in maximum health was getting smaller. He would have to do something about it after leaving here. He glanced at the status window. No new skills, and the stat boost wasn't exactly impressive. He hoped the boss fight wouldn't be too difficult. Suddenly a rumble was heard outside, and they ran out of the cave to see a unicorn emitting a bright light on a cliff. This was the secret boss of the Cold Valley, the unicorn. It was a noble and pure guardian, sleeping in the depths of the abyss. The unicorn's mission is to guard the peace of the valley's inhabitants. It awakens only when life on this land fades, to drive out the invaders and give the valley new life. Tianhao was very surprised. He had never seen anything like this before. Had they really stumbled upon a hidden boss? Well, he's in luck today, but its stats are far stronger than those of a regular zombie boss. The unicorn looked at him, its eyes lit up, and MC's consciousness clouded, finding himself hypnotized. Wanting to take a closer look at the unicorn's beauty, he walked straight to the cliff. The slime quickly caught up with him and bit his leg, causing him to immediately wake up and ask in surprise why it was biting him. The slime waved its tentacles at the girls, and they too succumbed to the hypnosis and walked toward the cliff. They had already taken a step into the abyss, but Tianhao managed to grab them and jumped aside. After that, they hid behind the rocks, avoiding the creature's gaze, and Chinger asked in surprise how the hidden boss had even appeared here. Li Shui asked, shouldn't the zombie leader be the boss of the Cold Valley? Why a unicorn? MC assumed it was because it guarded the other beasts, a guardian of the valley. It protects things like snow rabbits. Li Shay pointed out that they'd already killed a bunch of rotten wolves and Walking Dead, and nothing had happened. Or was it because they were undead? Chinger said that initially, if they followed the guide and just killed regular mobs, they could have easily reached the final boss, the zombie leader, and completed the dungeon. But they accidentally triggered a hidden boss, and its stats were far stronger than those of a regular zombie. They'd probably all die here. Li Shui burst into tears and suggested they run away, saying she didn't want to die. But Tianhao said that wasn't an option. They'd killed too many rabbits. They now had marks on their bodies. Li Shui became very upset and started blaming herself and her carrot, and MC patted her on the shoulder, asking with a serious expression, why is she blaming herself? It was thanks to her that they passed this place twice as fast as the record time. Now they only had to defeat the boss, and that's it. He stood up and told them not to be afraid. He wouldn't let anyone touch them. Chinger said that it was just some unicorn. He thinks she'll be scared? Just let the two of them not interfere with her. Li Shui thanked them, and at that moment, the unicorns screamed loudly, and they realized that they had been noticed and armed themselves. The unicorn used the horn ram skill. It descended from the cliff and jumped over the abyss, and Tianhao ordered everyone to scatter, after which the unicorn landed with a crash. Everything was silent for a few seconds. Then the unicorn used the melody of purification, spreading a sound wave. MC covered his ears and called out to Li Shui to do something, after which she played a melody protecting them from sound, and then the unicorn turned his gaze, screamed loudly, and rushed to attack. She was terrified. The horn was pointed straight at her, but Chinger arrived just in time and grabbed the creature by the horn, preventing it from getting close to the bard. She then swung her knee at the unicorn's neck and began provoking it. It worked. The unicorn turned on her, and she ran to the side, leading it away from Li Shui. After that, she jumped up and let out a laugh, saying that there was nothing special about this stealthy boss. But it was too early to rejoice. The unicorn jumped after her, Tianhao warned her of the danger, and the sharp horn pierced her chest. Seeing this, she was terrified, and then the creature threw her off its horn, and she fell into the snow. Li Shui immediately ran to her and checked on her condition, while MC became furious, summoned a slime, and said that now it was their turn. A demonic slime crept up behind the unicorn with a sinister grin. The creature immediately turned to look, then jumped up and spat slime at the enemy. The unicorn staggered, and Li Shui exclaimed that this was incredible. It was a hidden boss, and it managed to pin it down? Tianhao said, "The unicorn is weak to darkness, and the demonic slime deals dark damage. It perfectly counters this." He told the slime to continue the attack, and it fired another shot at the unicorn, hitting it right in the neck. The creature screamed loudly in pain, spread its wings, and took off. Li Shui was worried that it might escape, but MC wasn't going to let it go that easily. He ordered the slime to use strong corrosive slime and demon dance. After that, the slime prepared itself and jumped high into the air. It caught up with the unicorn in a matter of seconds, and then hit its wing, causing it to fall. Tianhao praised the slime for its good work, after which the unicorn collapsed to the ground and made a loud sound. They covered their ears, and the unicorn took advantage of this and rushed to attack the slime, but MC noticed it in time and gave the order. A sharp horn pierced the slime, but it was too late. The division had already begun. There were now 2 slimes. They rushed to attack, and then the unicorn used the stomp skill. Tianhao said that they needed to finish the fight as quickly as possible. The full armament buff would soon wear off. He gave the slime the order, at which point the unicorn crushed one of the halves, and then the other half approached the creature from behind and mounted it. The unicorn screamed loudly, the slime eating away at its skin, and then, after receiving fatal damage, it went berserk. MC thought this was bad. The unicorn had gone mad. He ordered the slime to retreat immediately, and it obeyed its master and jumped off the monster's back. The unicorn tried to come to its senses, but it simply stood there, looking at Tianhao, which struck him as rather strange. Why wasn't it attacking? Then he noticed blood trickling down the horse's legs, allowing grass to grow through the snow. Qinger rushed forward and asked why it was frozen. It needed to be finished off. Li Shui volunteered to help her, and he tried to stop them, but they ignored him, and Qinger exclaimed that he was hesitating, and she had to clean up after him. He became worried, and then she delivered the finishing blow. The unicorn howled. She saw tears in the beast's eyes and unconsciously took a step back, asking in shock, "Is it crying?" After that, a bright beam of light shot from the unicorn's body into the sky, accompanied by a piercing scream. The mountains trembled, stones fell from the cliffs, and one of them almost crushed them. But the slime protected them, absorbing the boulder and turning it into a holy stone. MC was glad that his monster had succeeded. Then, the rest of the stones tumbled from the peaks, and he cursed, saying that everything here is collapsing. He warned the others of the danger. A stone fell next to Li Shui, and she stepped aside with a frightened scream. Another stone was heading for Qinger. She immediately reacted and cut it in half, and then, passing the rest of the stones, ran to Tianhao. The slime covered them with itself, and Qinger exclaimed, "What's happening here? Why is everything collapsing?" MC said that the protector of this area had fallen, and the magic was beginning to dissipate, which was bad. Seeing a rock flying at the unicorn, he ordered the slime to split and protect it. A smaller slime grew from the slime, immediately headed for the unicorn, grabbed the rock, and absorbed it. The creature then covered it with a dome, protecting it from the rockfall. The unicorn coughed up blood. The avalanche immediately stopped, and Tianhao suggested the others take a look at the unicorn. They approached it, and Qinger, surprised, asked how this was possible. MC explained that unicorn blood has healing properties. Upon contact with the ground, it began to regenerate. The unicorn twitched and tried to get up, and Qinger exclaimed that they needed to kill it immediately and get out of the abyss. Tianhao stopped her, and she angrily asked why he was stopping her. Li Shui also noticed something was wrong with the creature, and Qinger asked in surprise, "Is she in cahoots with him?" MC realized the creature had just wanted to show them something, and then suddenly the unicorn began to twitch its legs and scream loudly, frightening the girls. Qinger said they couldn't wait any longer. They had to finish it off now. Tianhao asked her to wait, and she exclaimed that she had already said they couldn't drag it out any longer. The unicorn coughed up blood again, and something long and hard struck its stomach from the inside. It burst out, and a foal emerged, and the unicorn died. The foal couldn't walk properly yet, so it fell, and grass grew out of the snow. Qinger became worried and decided to nip the problem in the bud, because if this monster were to reincarnate, it would be bad. MC suddenly jumped out in front of her, just as she was about to swing, causing her to accidentally cut him with her claws, leaving a bloody streak on his cheek. Drops of blood fell on the foal's horn, causing it to glow. Qinger ignored this and grabbed Tianhao, indignantly asking what he was doing. Suddenly the foal spoke, saying that a contract had been concluded, after which it turned into light and penetrated Tianhao's head. A status window for the unicorn. his new summon popped up in front of him. He was transported to the space where the foal was sleeping, and he thought with a smile that he knew it all along. This unicorn was a female trying to protect the cub in her belly. Only he didn't expect that a contract could be made with a cub. Now he had a second creature. He returned to reality and Chinger asked in surprise, "Where is the unicorn?" Suddenly, everything shook. The ground began to crack, and Chinger, grabbing Li Shui's hand, ran with her to the exit and turned to Tianhao, asking why he was standing there. He gave the dead unicorn one last stroke and promised to take care of her cub, after which her body disappeared, and he received rewards for killing it. A horn, a mane, unicorn blood, and a reward chest for completing the Cold Valley. Everything around him was collapsing, but he decided to spend time checking the system window instead of escaping, and the rankings began updating. He froze and the girls called out to him, worriedly asking what he was doing. They needed to leave quickly. Because he hesitated, the ground eventually collapsed, and he fell into the abyss to the worried cries of his companions. The system offered him the opportunity to exit the dungeon, and as soon as he pressed the yes button, they were all teleported back to the entrance. Li Shui breathed a sigh of relief. She thought she was going to die. MC fell nearby. Chinger ran up to him, worried, and grabbed him by the collar, about to give him a couple of punches, but he was saved by the system's announcement of a ranking update date. Everyone was curious about who was now on the list, and most were certain that this team definitely hadn't taken first place, as Fang Chanyan's record was unbreakable. The portal lit up, and one of the awakened pointed it out and said that someone had emerged, probably the ones who broke the record. The guy noticed that another team had just emerged. Why wasn't it them? His friend called him a fool. They'd flown out as if they'd been trampled into the dirt, so it definitely wasn't them. The guy said it was logical and suggested they run to the other team before they missed their chance to join the strong. Chinger was extremely angry. She was about to start a fight, but her companions held her back. Finally, the second team came out. It was Wandong and his friends. He immediately noticed Tianhao and approached him, saying that he didn't expect such a good-for-nothing guy like him to get out alive. He was probably just forcibly thrown out. He looked at Chinger and asked, "Isn't that the school's beauty? How did she even end up on a team with this idiot?" Zhou Dashan agreed with him. It would be better if she joined their team. She rudely told him to shut his dirty mouth, and Yunfei got angry and exclaimed, "Has she completely lost her fear?" Wandong ordered him to move away from her, and then asked Tianhao, "Does he now see the difference between them?" He smirked. Of course he sees the difference. After all, he is on top, and he is a worm swarming in the ground. Wandong got really angry and grabbed him by the collar, shouting in his face. What did he say? A notification sounded, and a ranking update message appeared in front of every awakened person. Lin Tianhao was currently ranked first. Everyone was shocked. Wandong immediately dropped him, and someone exclaimed, "Fang Chunyan has held the top spot for 3 years. Has he finally been pushed aside?" They immediately decided to meet the new war god, while Dashan said that couldn't be true. He was just a loser. How could he be in first place? Yunfei exclaimed that he had cheated again. That scum had definitely cheated again. He'd already cheated on school tests before, and now he'd manipulated his rankings too. He was just a pathetic cheater. His words made others doubt Tianhao's abilities, and someone called them fools. This is the Black Abyss ranking. How can you cheat there? Yunfei turned sharply to look at whoever had just blurted that out, and immediately shut his mouth upon seeing the Murong siblings and their team. Murong Yu, an A-rank awakened talent and swordsman known as the Golden Saint Lion, and his sister, Shui, an A-rank assassin known as the Shadow Cloak. The team also included 3 other members, Yuhan, a B-rank light mage, Song Shaolan, a B-rank priest, and Lunyi, a B-rank berserker. They were all levels 7 to 9. All the awakened members were amazed, saying, "What charisma. They're not called the Murong family's Golden Saint Lions for nothing." MC became interested, looked through their status windows, and noticed that both had titles. They weren't just awakened members. But what were they doing here? Unlike them, mere mortals, such rich kids usually enter the abyss through special portals. Apparently this time, they wanted to be closer to the people. But still, they assembled a whole team. What is their goal? Wandong immediately became accommodating. He excitedly greeted Shui and introduced himself to her, but she ignored him and headed to Tianhao. Yunfei was indignant and asked, did they really prefer this loser to Wandong? Didn't they see who was in front of them? He was actually a holy shield. She turned to him and spat out in disgust. What's the point of a holy shield if worms like him are crawling inside it? He became very indignant. Wandong extended his hand to him, just to keep him from doing anything bad, and said that he didn't care what they thought of him, but he was warning him right away. This guy is nothing. His first place is nothing more than a system error. He told Tianhao that he could rejoice in his false victory, but next time he wouldn't let him get away with it. They left, and Chinger noted that the whiners had finally run away, and Murong Yu approached Tianhao and asked if he was the same. Lin Tianhao, who updated the Black Abyss rankings. He took off his glove and extended his hand in greeting. MC was surprised by his gesture. He hesitated for just a second, and Shui asked irritably, Are you stupid? Can't you see that her brother wants to say hello? Yu asked his sister not to interfere, and MC felt awkward. He wanted to shake his hand, but Chinger grabbed his wrist and asked the guy with displeasure, "Are you blind? Can't he see that he's already on her team?" Yu was getting annoyed and asked her to step aside since he wasn't speaking to her, but she refused and led Tianhao and Li Shui along. Shui stood in her way and said that she didn't like beating around the bush either. They only wanted him. One of the awakened asked, "What's going on? Is the Murong family trying to lure a summoner?" The guy said he wasn't an ordinary summoner, but the same awakened who broke the Black Abyss record. It's no surprise that the Murong family wanted to break the record too. With him on their team, it really is the shortest route. Xing'er firmly declared that she wouldn't let them take him, because if Tianhao left with them, her newly broken record would be immediately reset. Yuhan asked her to step aside, but he was already on edge, and someone said, "No doubt, it will be much easier to fight with the Murong family team, and it will be easier to level up with them, especially since they had 2 A rankers and 3 B rankers on their team." Li Shui took Tianhao's hand and asked, "He's not really going to join their team, is he?" You suggested they ask Tianhao themselves. They had no right to decide for him. He approached him and said with a smile that the Golden Saint Lion Knightly Order was inviting him to join their team. How did he like that offer? A system notification about a party invitation popped up in front of him. Chinger told the blonde guy not to even try, that Tianhao would never join them, but he betrayed her expectations and agreed. The girls were very surprised and at first couldn't even believe their ears. He repeated his words with a more confident smile, and Chinger indignantly asked, "What does that mean?" Li Shui covered her mouth in shock, not believing it, and Yu praised Tianhao for his wise choice. He really was a good specimen. All he had to do was confirm the invitation, and he was on the team. MC glanced at the notification, and Chinger begged him not to, while Yu smirked. Together they'll break a new record. It's beneficial for everyone, right? MC pressed the decline button, and everyone looked surprised. Shui indignantly asked what that meant. Yu raised his hand, motioning for her not to interfere, and Tianhao smirked and told them to take their time. He could join, but first, they had to fulfill a couple of his conditions. Shui said that his joining their team was already a privilege, so he shouldn't be too arrogant. In response, MC simply turned to his team and said it was their choice. Yu wasn't about to let him go so easily, though. He asked what his conditions were, and he replied, "It's simple, really, a trifle. First, after entering the Black Abyss, everyone obeys only him. Second, no one has the right to take his experience without his permission. Third, all the loot from killed monsters goes to him." Shui didn't even expect that, and the other awakened said it was just plain impudent. But they need a summoner, so the conditions aren't too strict. If they agree, then the Murong family will obey the summoner. If not, then they won't be able to enter the rankings. MC asked with a smirk, "What's their answer?" If they accept his conditions, he'll join the team immediately. Xiaolan told the captain that they can't agree to that. He doesn't respect them at all. Chinger glanced at Tianhao with a satisfied smirk and then asked them, "What? They don't like that? Then let them try to enter the rankings themselves." People said they were so insolent to treat the Murong family like that, although since he broke Fang's record, he holds all the cards. Lun Yi was furious. He was about to teach this upstart some respect himself, and the captain ordered them all to stop and let them remember why they came in the first place. If he doesn't want to join the team, then why are they trying to humiliate him? MC pointed out that this would be unnecessary, and Shui clicked her tongue in irritation. Yu himself was barely holding back and said, "So what? Some Cold Valley ranking, but he shouldn't get so arrogant, otherwise he'll end up badly." He turned and left with the team, and Chinger waved after them, telling them to get out of here already. Shui glanced at Tianhao and reminded him of this prank. MC warmed up and suggested that the girls enter the abyss again to level up to 10, and suddenly, he felt a chill run through his body. The two asked in a rage. He wasn't planning on joining them, was he? How dare he toy with their feelings? They already thought he really was that heartless and traitorous. After that, they gave him a good beating, then went to get supplies and ordered him to wait there. After that, he stood up and cursed. He was in so much pain. It would be better if they beat monsters like that. There was still more than an hour until the next login. He needed to find a place and rest a bit. He went into the forest, checked the status window, and thought that the experience from defeating the unicorn had just allowed him to rise to level 6. By the way, he still didn't know what the unicorn he had signed a contract with was capable of. He decided to summon it and check it out. A magic circle appeared in front of him. He commanded the unicorn to appear, after which there was a bright flash, but when the light disappeared, he saw only fog in the place of the magic circle, and nothing more. He burst into tears, wondering where his horse was, and the system notified him that the summoning had failed. He should check the status of the summoned creature. He scratched the top of his head in confusion, opened the unicorn status window, and the system said that the summoned creature had not hatched yet. Did he want to start hatching? He clicked yes, after which the system said that there were 3 days left until hatching. He was upset, but all he could do was wait, and then he remembered he hadn't checked his rewards yet. The system informed him he had a chest for completing the Cold Valley. Opening it would give him a random item, equipment, materials, or potions from the Black Abyss. Did he want to open it? He had just decided to open it, but he received a letter, a reward for setting a historical record for completing the Cold Valley. He received the title of Fastest Man, which was immediately clear that it wasn't a very good title, He would be laughed at for it, but that didn't matter now. He opened the reward pack, and 2 chests appeared in front of him. The first contained guardian armor and 2 small experience potions. He was happy with the equipment and decided to check the other chest, and it contained a necklace of ice, silver tier equipment that increases mana and a little spiritual power, grants +5 cold resistance, and reduces the slow effect of cold by 15%. The chest also contained a medium experience potion worth 15 points and a medium recovery potion, which restores health by 150. Tianhao was pleased with the reward. Equipment is divided into 9 ranks: normal, bronze, silver, gold, platinum, diamond, radiant, legendary, and divine. He didn't expect to immediately receive a silver-ranked item. That was luck. He decided to equip it right away and immediately felt the changes. That's what equipment means. His stats also increased. He still had 2 attribute points left, so he decided to upgrade his full armor skill to 3. Now, protecting summoned creatures requires even less spiritual power, and the summoned creature's stats are doubled, lasting 200 seconds. He was very happy. Now dungeons will take less time, and then comes the slime upgrade. The slime's level increased to 9, and after that, he received a notification, 6 levels left until the next evolution. He was very surprised by this news. He hadn't even thought slimes could evolve. He got excited because evolution meant a new skill. He decided to check it out quickly. There weren't any details written about it, but that didn't bother him at all. It was easier to just try it. He pressed the button, and his health decreased by 500. After which streams of demonic energy began to emanate from the slime, and a bright beam of light shot into the sky. MC was nervous for a second, but from the tornado of light and energy, a transformed slime emerged, the sight of which surprised him greatly. Meanwhile, the girls approached the rift. It was already time to gather, and Tianhao was nowhere to be found. Li Shui approached her, sat down on the floor to rest, and said they could check his location through the squad panel. Qing'er didn't think of this right away, and when she opened the map, she saw him in the forest and asked what he was doing there. She suggested that Li Shui go and find him, and she, taking a huge bag of apples, tiredly ran after her. They were already at the entrance to the forest. At this time MC saw his new slime, who turned out to be a girl. Since she appeared before him without clothes, he was very embarrassed and looked away, asking why she was naked. Seeing her owner, the slime ran to him on all fours, and then jumped high into the air and threw herself into his arms. She knocked him to the ground, and what Tianhao was so embarrassed about appeared right in front of his face, and she didn't even understand what was going on. He abruptly grabbed her hand and stood up, exclaiming, "Even if he wanted to, what kind of pervert do you have to be to do this to your pet?" He took a t-shirt from his inventory and threw it into her hands, but she didn't understand what to do and simply absorbed it. He slapped himself in the face and called her an idiot, saying she needed to put it on. She didn't know how, so he had to put it on himself. He pulled the shirt on her and wondered if he would have to play the father role now too. He saw the slime open a status window that listed the stats the shirt boosted, and he wondered, so the summoned creature could wear gear like a normal fighter? Maybe it was because she was now humanoid? He hadn't looked at her new stats after evolution, so he decided to look at them right now. In addition to increased stats, she now had 2 skills. One was an area of effect attack, and the other was a single target attack. Corrosive acid rain slime. By detaching a body part, it creates a cloud and releases acid rain on the target area with a strong corrosive effect, causing continuous damage. Demon's Embrace. Once the target is entangled in acid-covered tentacles, they will experience true torment, akin to hellish torture. This one deals high damage per second to the target. MC noted that this area of effect skill is apparently a level-up skill, while Demon's Embrace is learned during evolution. Both skills are very cool. He should definitely try them out later. Meanwhile, the girls were looking for him everywhere. Qing'er had already started cursing, and seeing that they were very close, she told Li Shui to keep up. He was somewhere ahead. Qing'er peeked out from behind a tree, telling Tianhao that they had finally found him, but seeing a little girl next to him, she froze. Li Shui just approached her and sighed heavily from exhaustion, and when she also saw the girl, her face immediately turned red. Qing'er indignantly called out to Tianhao and asked what he was doing there. He was startled by the suddenness and asked what they were doing here, and Qing'er exclaimed in displeasure that they were looking for him all over the forest, and he was doing something here with a little girl. Realizing what they were thinking, he was horrified, after which Qing'er hit him on the head a couple of times, and when he explained everything to her, she irritably asked how she was supposed to know that it was already an evolved slime. He exclaimed that she didn't give him even a second to explain, after which he called the slime away and asked what they were even doing here. Qing'er answered him that the gathering time had long since passed. If they hadn't come for him, they wouldn't have ended up in the Black Abyss. MC scratched his head in confusion and, looking at the time, said that he was resting there and completely forgot about it. After that, they entered the abyss again. Meanwhile, Moralnew's group and the others were walking through the cold valley. Shui told his brother that they had already cleared everything here, but it still hadn't appeared. He looked at his reflection in the blade with a grim expression and said, "It looks like someone got ahead of them. And who is capable of clearing dungeons so quickly?" Yu Han asked the captain what they were going to do now, and Lin Yi said they needed to find out who had taken their loot and buy it back, no matter what the cost. The guy immediately hit him on the head and exclaimed, Are you crazy? First, it's a 1,000-year-old divine beast, and second, this is their secret quest. They can't reveal it to outsiders like that. Xiaolun suggested that another guild had already captured the beast, and Shui sternly ordered everyone to shut up. They were just dumb idiots. The unicorn had probably been seized by a lone team without a guild. The other guilds didn't have any shards, so they couldn't have known the unicorn had awakened, unless another team, one of those that had already entered the Black Abyss, accidentally encountered and defeated the beast. Her brother said she was right. The unicorn had awakened prematurely, and the Black Abyss was unstable. Besides them, the Golden Holy Lions, no other guild could have known about this in advance. The divine beast had been slain, a resonance had begun in the Black Abyss, and the dungeon had become more difficult. Who had actually defeated that beast? Shui said, since the artifact was now in someone else's hands, and those who had just emerged from the abyss were few. Perhaps they would kill them and take what was rightfully theirs? She would especially like to rein in that insolent man. Her brother had immediately turned her down. After all, they were the Order of the Golden Holy Lion, and they didn't engage in senseless slaughter. Besides, if he had defeated a hidden boss, it meant he was no easy opponent. He glanced into the distance and wondered if this could really be the same summoner who had recently set a record. His sister wanted to object, but he cut her off immediately and said that they would first return with a report, and then they would decide everything. Let them follow him back to the guild. He plunged his sword into the thick ice, after which they emerged from the abyss, and at the same moment the three entered. Li Shui immediately cast a cold spell on them, and Qing'er said that they acted quickly this time. She went ahead. Tianhao said that she was such a conceited person, and soon they reached the forest. She said that the first rotten wolf appears here. It's time for a warm-up. She heard sounds, immediately transformed into cat form, and told the beasts to be ready to be torn to shreds. 5 stray wolves jumped out at them at once. Seeing them, they became confused, and MC thought, the number of monsters at the first spawn point has increased by 5? That's strange. Qing'er asked, so what if there are 5 of them? She will destroy them with one blow. With these words, she rushed to attack, and when she ran very close to them, she called out to Li Shui, who played a bard's song, to weaken the opponents. Then Qing'er struck each of them and said with a grin that it was easy. The monsters died instantly, and Tianhao noted, Qing'er, at her new level, now deals almost 400 damage in a single strike. After all, her combat class makes itself felt. She said that even if there were 100 of them, she wouldn't be afraid. No matter how many came, she would kill them all. But MC was confused by the sudden increase in their number. Could it be a coincidence? Qing'er decided not to dwell on it and moved on, telling him to keep up, and he thought that everything would become clear at the next monster spawn point. When Tianhao looked around, he said something was wrong. Qing'er turned to Li Shui and told them to keep buffing her, as she was about to destroy everyone herself. Li Shui responded positively, but Tianhao told them to wait. He didn't understand what was happening, and Qing'er shouted for everyone to calm down. Suddenly, a huge pile of snow fell right in front of them, and from it emerged an incredibly huge monster. This creature emitted dark magical power, and Tianhao remembered they had been hiding behind the snow. It was a hunting trap, after all. At that moment, a swarm of monsters surrounded them, and Qing'er asked why there were so many. Li Shui, frightened, wondered what they should do now. He remarked that this didn't seem like a coincidence like before. Had these creatures really learned to think? At that moment, a bright explosion occurred, and the girls were thrown aside. Tianhao was shouting to be careful when he suddenly stopped, and using his magical powers, stood in front of the monster. The creature began attacking him from behind, and the girls screamed that things were bad. When they saw the monster's huge, gaping mouth in front of them, Tianhao grinned and summoned a slime demon. At that moment, everything was illuminated by a bright purple light, and the knights didn't understand what was happening. The ground suddenly began to tremble. They should watch what was happening at the entrance. People were screaming and asking for help, and numerous skulls and various body parts fell out. The terrified knights screamed in horror, and some immediately vomited at the sight of what was happening. They didn't understand what the hell was going on, and one of the destroyed guys, with blood in his mouth, said that a breakthrough had begun in the Black Abyss. The man asked, what does that mean? What was he even talking about? What did it mean? A breakthrough in the Black Abyss has begun. But this guy died right in the arms of a man who saw a system window in front of him and reported, fallen fighter, transfer to the Hall of the Dead, countdown to 5. He couldn't understand how this was even possible, and looking around, realized there were a lot of skeletons and dead people around. They were all dead, every single one. At that moment, skulls continued to emerge from the magical portal, and they had a bunch of skeletons again. People looked at the system windows and screamed, what's going on? Has the Black Abyss difficulty changed? The current difficulty was a nightmare. They definitely can't handle this level. They need to report this to the mayor immediately. After all, a breakthrough had begun in the Black Abyss. One of the guards screamed in terror while Tianhao extended his hand and summoned a slime demon. The monsters attacked him with incredible speed, but when Tianhao closed his eyes, he managed to shake off the attack and the assault thanks to his spell. The surrounding area glowed bright red, and the monsters looked on in surprise as a huge number of them were destroyed with a single blow. Tianhao rose into the air and grinned at them with his skill. Qing'er asked in surprise, is he really that strong? Li Shui confirmed, that's powerful. Tianhao told the two of them to retreat. Li Shui shouted that they didn't need to be asked twice, and Qing'er exclaimed that they believed in him, champion, and waved goodbye. For some reason, she felt like the monsters had gotten stronger. Could he handle it alone? Li Shui shouted, roast those monsters, Commander. When Tianhao was left alone, he suggested the monsters attack him now. They became enraged and opened their mouths to pounce on him, but they failed as one monster after another was sent flying in different directions. Tianhao ordered them to dismount and push them back, and moments later, the creature destroyed them with a single blow. They didn't know what to do, as the commander was pinned down from both sides, but Qing'er reflected that these men were much stronger than ordinary wolves, and Tianhao was now in serious danger. Tianhao tensed and shouted that he was defending him, and while he continued to control the creature, he succeeded perfectly. The monsters began to bite the slime, causing the girls to become terrified and exclaim, "Damn!" Li Shui screamed, "Look, their health is depleting. This is simply amazing. Schultz deals damage on contact, and these leaders will be finished." The monsters roared loudly in pain and terror, but continued to break through the slime and gnaw at it. Qing'er screamed that this couldn't be happening, after which the monster's health finally decreased. Tianhao muttered, "This is interesting. What should he do?" The defense was broken. He shouted at Li Shui to heal him quickly, and at that moment, she shouted, "Okay." When Tianhao appeared around the trap again, he shouted, "Hurry up, they're already close." Qing'er used her powers and gave him these bonus values. Tianhao looked around and asked, "Coordinated action again?" So his guess was correct. The monster tried to strike directly at him, and Li Shui shouted at him to watch out, but Qing'er pushed her aside and screamed, "Have she gone mad?" Li Shui said in bewilderment, "Tianhao was there after all." Qing'er fearfully said that she'd think of something, and then abruptly turned away, wondering if she really had to use it. She held a potion in her hands. The name was Energy Potion. The effect was that after using it, the body temporarily increases in power for 1 minute, and after the effect ends, she takes double damage. With shaking hands, Qing'er decided she didn't care and would do it. Tianhao smiled and allowed the slime to attack again, and at that moment, the monsters were thrown aside. The girls were stunned by what they saw and were surprised to see the rotten wolves thrown aside. A moment later, Tianhao destroyed them all, using the demon's embrace. Raising his hand, he clenched his fist and dealt even more damage to the creature, which incinerated them to the bone. The system reported that a rotten stray wolf had been killed and experience gained. Li Shui rejoiced and cried out, "Yes!" Qing'er realized that he had crushed a level 10 wolf king with his bare hands, and this was incredibly amazing. One of the wolves shook in pain and terror, and another monster grabbed a weapon and began smashing the ground. Then the monster grabbed its friend and lifted him from his knees. The girls were left in danger, and the system reported a combo attack, a rotten hammerstorm. When the monster used its magical powers, Tianhao was surprised. What the hell was that? A whirlwind of rotten corpses? Qing'er realized it was a combo attack. Monsters at the entry level of the Black Abyss should be able to use such items. After combining their defenses, the attack surged, and Tianhao definitely couldn't withstand it alone. She shouted at him to be careful, and at that moment, a huge purple vortex engulfed everything around him. The slime held incredible power, and he shouted for action. A moment later, the two of them tried to shake off the attack, and Li Shui screamed in fear that he was about to die. What should they do? Qing'er grew angry and thought that he hadn't yet received her permission to die. She then drank the potion, and at that moment, her entire body ignited with incredible force. She emitted incredible energy, frightening Li Shui. She transformed into a bear-like beast, then approached the monster and began to destroy the vortex. Li Shui asked, "Is she a bear?" At that moment, she looked at her in fear and suddenly fainted from fear. Qing'er replied that she didn't expect this potion to help her awaken her white bear form, after which she realized there was no time to waste as Tianhao was in danger. She used her white bear form, then rushed to attack and began to roar loudly. Tianhao was surprised. "Are they kidding me? There's a bear in there too?" He ordered the slime to retreat, after which Qing'er continued the battle and destroyed the monsters. Tianhao screamed, "That's all." It looked like he was definitely going to die here today. But suddenly his expression distorted, and he was surprised to be unharmed. He turned around, and Qing'er screamed, "Why is he frozen? He should quickly attack him now." He was surprised that it was her, and asked the slime to use Demon Embrace. At that moment, his powers spread everywhere, and Qing'er said, "So that's how strong he is." She fell to the ground while the monster tried to avoid the attack, and she shouted at him, "Hurry up, it's preparing a combo attack again." Tianhao asked, "Does it think he'll let the same technique be used twice?" At that moment, he summoned the slime again and directed his powers toward the monsters, capturing them. Then, he clenched his fist and dissolved the monsters in the process. Qing'er was overjoyed that they had finally finished off those creatures, but then she grew very tired and began to collapse. Tianhao thanked her for coming to his aid in time. He was about to be turned into mush by those hunchback mountain zombies. He thought it was strange that she'd never transformed into a bear before, and he waved at her. But when Ching-er looked at her hands, she saw that her health was 4,676, and it suddenly dropped to 1. It was damage over time, and things were bad. She began to slump to the ground, unconscious, and he asked, "What's going on?" When she finally collapsed, he picked her up and screamed, but suddenly she started coughing up blood and realized she had 10 health points left. She was lucky to have survived the necropolis. He asked her not to panic, as he would now give her a potion. When he handed her a flask of liquid, she drank it and suddenly began to recover. Tianhao was glad that, thank God, everything was alright, when he suddenly felt something soft and asked with incredible embarrassment, "What the hell is that?" Ching-er looked at him in bewilderment and suddenly screamed, "Is he okay?" Blood began to flow from his nose from embarrassment, and when Ching-er realized everything that was happening, she began screaming that he was a pervert. She slapped him in the face with incredible force, causing them to ask, "Why did that happen?" After all, he saved her. As he flew off, Ching-er rose to her feet and screamed his name, then came closer and threatened that, if he told anyone about this, she would kill him. He shouted back that she was dying and that he had nothing to do with it. He was surprised that she was embarrassed, and Ching-er continued screaming, grabbing his shirt. Did he hear her? He shouted, "Yes, he swears so." After that, Ching-er let him go and told him to remember that she wouldn't repeat it a second time. Tianhao, perplexed, replied that he understood, and she decided to go check on Li Shui. He replied, "Yes, sir, Mrs. Ching-er." Together, they arrived at the stone where Li Shui lay. She was breathing deeply, and Tianhao asked if she could fall asleep in such a situation. What kind of nerves did she have? He asked her to wake up and came closer, but she didn't even move. Suddenly, she jumped up and shouted not to eat her, and Ching-er said that if the monster had wanted to eat her, she'd be swimming in stomach acid right now. They'd killed all the monsters, so she should relax. She asked again, "Really?" Tianhao replied yes, after which Li Shui rejoiced and, screaming loudly, hugged Tianhao, saying thank God everyone was alive. He replied that it was all thanks to Ching-er's timely intervention. So, what should they do now? Tianhao decided they'd probably notice the increase in the Black Abyss's difficulty. Ching-er confirmed that there were more monsters and their efforts were clearly more powerful than before. Li Shui wondered, so what should they do now? Tianhao thought they should exit the Black Abyss. It was dangerous to remain in these conditions. Li Shui agreed, as they shouldn't risk it, and Ching-er supported this option. Tianhao replied, "Okay," and then confirmed the logout. But the system reported that the exit had failed, and the girls were terrified. The starting zone of the Black Abyss was a cold valley, with recommended levels 1 to 10, and the current difficulty was Nightmare. He realized the Abyss's difficulty had changed again, and Li Shui was shaking with fear, asking what they should do now. Would they be unable to exit this place now? Ching-er told her not to be afraid. The difficulty had increased, but it was still the starting level, so they would overcome it. Tianhao replied that everything was correct. The elements level hadn't changed, it just became more difficult. Li Shui exclaimed that even the normal monsters were too strong, so what would happen to the boss then? Ching-er explained that they would first rise to level 10. The faster the better. But Tianhao had a bad feeling about this. Ching-er told Li Shui to leave, and she asked if they weren't going together. Tianhao replied that if they split up, they wouldn't have to share experience, and they would level up faster that way, so he was of little use. Li Shui waved and said it was all clear, then they would meet here when everyone was level 10. After some time, Tianhao was left alone, and after an hour, he was with the slime and leveled up to level 10. He had a hard time, to be honest. The slime said that even though the three of them could only reach a maximum of level 10, summoned creatures in the abyss had no such limit. Tianhao confirmed this was true. His summons could only be leveled up through sacrifice. He examined the stats in the system and noted that the stats were progressing slowly. Was that because of his class? It would be great to speed up the hatching process. Another summon would mean less strain on him. Maybe there was a way in this book? When he started flipping through the pages, he found it right away, and suddenly several wolves appeared around them. He realized this was bad, because the boss would spawn. He turned around abruptly and heard a loud rumble. Tianhao realized that the leader of the walking corpses had awakened. The slime was stunned, and suddenly Tianhao heard the girls screaming for help. It was Li Shui and Ching-er, trying to escape the monster, which was escalating the situation and approaching them. Li Shui screamed, "No, it's getting close," and suddenly fell to the ground. Ching-er turned around and shouted her name, then tried to save her and used her spirit cat skill, Shadow Step. The monster slammed the ground, sending the girls flying. Li Shui cried out that her mana had run out, and Ching-er suddenly flew into the air, using her magical powers to try to do something, but she lost health and fell to the ground. Tianhao shouted at the slime to act now and save them. He ran closer and asked how they were feeling. The girls were unconscious, and Ching-er said her hand felt nothing. At that moment, a bright magical vortex appeared near them. Tianhao noticed it first and saw several monsters emerge from it. He warned them to be careful, as this leader had become much stronger than before. Yes, it was completely different. The monster had become more human-like. When Tianhao saw all the monster's stats, he looked at Ching-er, who had no health, and she told him he couldn't remove this monster and should flee. The monster abruptly moved and shouted that running was no longer an option, But even on nightmare difficulty, this was only the starting location. If he could break the crystal, everything might work out. The protagonist asked the slime to use the demon dance skill, and at that moment, everything around him began to glow with bright colors as the slime approached the monster. Tianhao also used the full arm skill, after which the slime split into 2 parts and enveloped the monster from different sides. The slime passed through the monster, but immediately took heavy damage. Tianhao was startled and exclaimed, "What?" The monster simply slammed its enormous weapon against the stone, leaving it stained. The slime lay powerless, and Tianhao shouted for it to return, only to realize it was no match for this monster. When the monster raised its weapon, Tianhao tensed and realized he had no choice but to use the accelerated summoning he'd recently read about. He cast a spell, causing the monsters to pounce on him, and he screamed, "Damn!" At that moment, the monsters began to spurt purple liquid from their bones, and at that moment, Qing'er lunged forward and suddenly began coughing up blood. He continued casting the spell, realizing he was going very wrong. He might not make it in time. A moment later, the entire land was bathed in bright sunlight, and Tianhao wondered what it was. He realized it was a protective aura created by Li Shui. He gaped in shock at the monster, and Li Shui shouted that her protective aura was only level 1 and wouldn't last long. Tianhao pleaded with the spell to work and continued flipping through the pages of the book. A moment later, the barrier was destroyed and the monster pounced on them. But at that moment, the egg began to crack, and Tianhao, eagerly awaiting this, declared that the spell had been completed. At that moment, bright rays of light enveloped the monster, and it froze. Tianhao asked with a smile, "Did it really work?" A large unicorn appeared before them, and they stood dumbfounded, waiting. A multitude of ice shards appeared around the monster, and Qing'er shouted that things were bad. The leader of the walking corpses had entered the second phase, and Tianhao should flee quickly. Tianhao sent the unicorn on its way, but suddenly saw the creature spreading its energy, greatly surprising him. A struggle ensued between them, and a moment later, a bright beam of light emanated from the unicorn's horn and struck the monster in the chest. Everyone watched intently, and Qing'er, stunned, said that it couldn't be happening. The boss, with 30,000 health, had been destroyed in one blow. Tianhao was also very surprised, then ran up to the unicorn and asked, "Is this all right?" It was a special unicorn, and Tianhao declared that everything was fine. The leader of the walking corpses, the unicorn, was simply incredible. The slime hugged Tianhao from behind and closed its eyes. Tianhao smiled and said that she deserved credit too. If she hadn't stopped the leader of the walking corpses in the end, he would have been smashed to the ground by now. "By the way, how are you girls feeling?" Qing'er didn't expect him to save them again. "Is this his new summon?" A first-level summon managed to defeat the boss of the leader of the walking corpses. She was simply shocked. Tianhao replied that he himself did not know that he could be so tall. And Qing'er continued to say that the leader of the walking corpses was a piece of dark attribute trash, a unicorn minion with dual light and ice attributes, and that such damage was the result of a basic advantage. He did it, and so it was. After which the system congratulated the adventurer party on successfully killing the boss of the walking corpse breeder. The system began to evaluate their reward, after which Tianhao was very surprised. He found himself in a dark space and looked around, when suddenly a magic cube appeared in front of him. The system reported the item name as Hellfire Spirit Tablet, legendary quality, and the note, Summoner Equipment. Stats: Attack 30, Defense 50, Speed 60, Spiritual Power 200. He took the cube in his hands and asked why a legendary item had negative attack and defense. Wait, so this summons defeated enemies, and it can also infuse the souls of fallen, existing minions? That's quite interesting. He looked at the bright beam of light in the sky, after which magical power began to spread from his cube. The system reported the soul of a nightmare tier boss +1. The soul of the walking corpse maker was indeed sealed in this cube. Apparently, souls can still be collected for some time after the battle. At that moment, a huge wolf appeared next to him, and it turned out that Qing'er had knocked it down. She asked, "Did she scare him?" Tianhao replied that he thought it was another monster. But wait, she was a cat spirit. How did she become a wolf? Qing'er asked again. Did he think he was the only one with a hidden equipment reward? She had gotten something too. He asked again, looking at the system window. What? Attack and speed doubled. Yes, it's an epic, but it looks more powerful than its legendary counterpart. Phoenix Warrior, what kind of beast is that? Qing'er replied that she didn't know herself, but it says here about the side effects, so she's hesitant to try it for now. Tianhao agreed, but there was no need for it for now. Suddenly, Li Shui called out to them, causing them to turn around and see a small cyclone flying around her. They asked who it was. Li Shui replied that from now on, she could protect them too. A guardian was perched on her shoulder. She remarked that the new items she'd received looked truly powerful. Tianhao examined the stats, and Li Shui asked what a cyclone was. She seemed unaware of it. Qing'er replied that she didn't know either, and suggested asking the master when they exited this dungeon. Tianhao examined the system and asked if this could really be the cyclone. She remarked that its passive was simply insane. Tianhao replied that, compared to that, his chest didn't look like a pile of junk. At that moment, a slime and a unicorn ran up to him, and he said it was good that the unicorn was with them, otherwise they would have been finished. At that moment, Qing'er looked at this questioningly, when suddenly the unicorn approached Li Shui and began to smile. She said that it was so soft like silk. Qing'er asked, why can't she touch it? Tianhao replied, okay, He suggests they get out of here already. This time the difficulty of the abyss has suddenly jumped. They need to figure out what happened. Ching'er was upset and Tianhao pressed the exit button when suddenly everything was illuminated by a bright light and the guys dissolved into pixels. They arrived on Earth, and the surrounding guys began to be surprised. Someone is leaving. This girl is so beautiful. Is this even legal? She's so beautiful, just like a cyclone. Tianhao looked at them questioningly, bewildered, when suddenly he turned back and saw that the unicorn had completely transformed. He was very embarrassed, and his nose started bleeding. She asked, "Master, doesn't he recognize her?" He asked, "Is she really a unicorn?" All the boys started shouting at the teacher that things were bad. He asked, "What happened?" The students said that someone had emerged from the huge abyss dungeon, and the teacher asked, "Are there any more wounded?" He decided they should go with him, as time was running out. A boy grabbed him and said that they weren't wounded, but alive. The teacher asked, perplexed, "What?" At that moment, the system announced that it congratulated the protagonist, Ching'er, and Li Shui, on completing the initial Abyss Dungeon, Cold Valley, Nightmare difficulty. The unicorn greeted her master, and he asked her to stop and not approach him. She grabbed his hand and asked, "Master, does he no longer want her?" He suggested they talk calmly, hands free. Li Shui touched Ching'er and asked her to look into the distance. When Ching'er saw this, she became very angry and shouted that Tianhao was a sick pervert. After that, she slapped him in the face, and Tianhao sat on the ground with tears in his eyes and clutched his cheek. Li Shui came closer and asked if he was okay. If he wanted, she could chant a spell. He thanked her for it, because she was very caring, unlike Ching'er. Li Shui replied, "Okay, they are a team, and it's normal for each other to help." Ching'er got angry and put a sweater on the unicorn, after which she turned around, frowning. Tianhao didn't understand what was wrong with her and asked about it, when suddenly he saw an important man approaching them. He greeted the students, and the guys didn't understand. "Is this Principal Yun? Why did he come here?" Ching'er replied that this was clearly not praise, when suddenly Li Shui raised her hand and shouted that they were here. The guys were very surprised by her behavior and were dumbfounded. Yun turned to look at them questioningly, when suddenly they were grabbed by masked men. Yun silently watched as they disappeared, and the guys found themselves in the forest. The teacher just told them not to let them notice them, when suddenly Ching'er started screaming, "Who are they?" Tianhao asked her to calm down, because this man was his homeroom teacher. The teacher looked around, and Tianhao asked what was going on. He replied that, in short, a breakout of the dead and wounded had begun in the Black Abyss, and apparently, the people blamed him. Tianhao asked fearfully, "What does that mean?" He replied that his summoning was a unicorn, right? He made a contract in the Abyss, right? The protagonist asked again, "How does he know about that?" The teacher replied that he had indeed tamed it, and even managed to raise it. Tianhao cursed that this damned old man would drive him to the grave with this expectation. The teacher grabbed him by the shoulders and shouted that he was screwed. He asked again what kind of nonsense this was, and what he should do now. At that moment, someone said they had found him, and the guys were surrounded. Yun shouted to grab them, and Tianhao tensed up, when suddenly the teacher shouted, "Who dared do this?" Yun asked, what was he doing here? He should get out of here. The teacher told him to listen to him. After all, they were students from the school, weren't they? Tianhao was surprised that the teacher and the principal were students of the same mentor. Yun said that from now on, no more. He officially announced that Tianhao, Li Shui, and Ching'er were expelled. They exclaimed in fear, "What does this mean?" Li Shui was upset and said it couldn't be. Yun shouted, repeating that the three had been expelled from the school. They began to wonder, why? Yun replied that it was because he was the principal, and Tianhao asked, "The principal? He hasn't even looked into the matter yet and is already expelling them. That's unfair." The teacher confirmed that it was true. Even if he was the principal, he couldn't expel people without reason. Moreover, he possessed a vocal talent. Such talents are born once every 100 years. Was he willing to lose such a rare gem? Yun pushed him away and shouted for him to get away, because he didn't understand anything, and today he had to get them out of here. If they hesitated, it would be too late. At that moment, the guys grew alert and someone shouted for everyone to stop. Yun turned around in alarm, and they waited. They saw a short girl approach them and say, "So this is the summoner who went through the dungeons on the nightmare level? He looks pretty good." Tianhao scratched his head and asked, "Who is this girl?" She grew angry and shouted, "What girl?" She was the daughter of the Dupan imperial family, Jinyao. He paused. The imperial family? He didn't recall anything like that. Yun said, "Miss Jinyao, the criminals have already been captured and were just about to be brought in for questioning." She replied that there was no need to do that. Let them go. Her assistant came closer and announced that here was a scroll to move to the black abyss of the split gorge. They would take them there. The teacher said he heard that hidden dungeons of the century were supposed to appear in the coming days. The black abyss is the gorge, but he didn't expect the imperial family to have already obtained the scroll. But that only recommends levels 20 to 50, and Tianhao and the others had only just reached level 10. and entering it was tantamount to a death sentence. She sneered at them for being commoners and said she was ordering them to join the Black Abyss of the Split Gorge investigation team under their family's command. The protagonist replied that he apologized but wasn't interested. Jinyao became very angry and shouted, "What did he say?" The director said that, while he didn't want to spoil the mistress's mood, they were academy students and they were obligated to escort them back. Jinyao screamed that she hated being interrupted while she was speaking. Her subordinate approached the director and asked if he hadn't expelled them. Yun replied that until the expulsion papers were finalized, they remained his students. She asked, "Director, is he planning to disobey the imperial family's orders?" Yun became angry, and Li Shui asked the protagonist what they should do. Jinyao approached him and said that he realized how many eyes were watching him now that he had passed through the Black Abyss on the nightmare level. He abruptly turned to face the guards lined up, leaving Qing'er and Li Shu feeling vulnerable. Qing'er screamed that she agreed, because it was either this or prison, so they'd better take the risk. Jinyao asked again, "Well, had he changed his mind?" The teacher shouted that they couldn't go there, that it was the Black Abyss of the Split Gorge. If he fell in, it would be considered a death sentence. He agreed, and Li Shui replied that she would go too. At that moment, Jinyao laughed loudly, after which her subordinate asked Yun to let them go. He replied, "Fine," but the teacher shouted he had to stop it. Yun replied that he had tried, but he had decided to stop him, and now his hands were tied. At that moment, the commander of the Imperial Swordsman's squad, Sheng, approached them with Lucy, the head butler of the Dupan family, at his side. They mustn't deceive her with their appearance. She had sufficient strength. Jinyao announced that the team was assembled, and they were moving out. A moment later, a bright light appeared on the field. They arrived directly at the palace, and the maids bowed before their mistress. She entered the open doors, and Tianhao asked, "Are they in the Imperial Palace? It's quite luxurious." Li Shui turned to Qing'er and said she had a bad feeling, and she asked again, "What do you mean?" At that moment, a loud sound erupted, and the girls were frozen in terror. They were surrounded by Sheng and Lucy, who pointed their weapons at them, and the guys shouted, "What are they up to?" She remarked that naive newcomers are easiest to deceive. She asked Lucy to deal with them. At that moment, Tianhao's slime took their weapons and surrounded them. The slime terrified Lucy, who screamed in terror, and Tianhao asked Jinyao to take the trouble to explain what was happening. She asked, "So he finally noticed?" He snapped his fingers and let go of the guys, explaining that Sheng, although he had looked relaxed the entire way, had kept his thumb on his sword. Lucy, meanwhile, was ready to draw her pistol this whole time, not to mention the little girl. Jinyao replied, "It's not for nothing that they're called rookies, having managed to traverse the abyss of the nightmare level. They're very observant, but they had the initiative, so why did he decide to retreat?" Tianhao replied that this was their territory, and if a fight broke out, both camps would have lost too much, especially since their levels were significantly higher than theirs. He simply wanted to show they weren't defenseless lambs being led to slaughter. Lucy bowed and said that Lady Jinyao merely wanted to test the strength of the respected ones, and therefore asked for no ill will. Qing'er grew angry, and she continued that before leaving, the imperial family had prepared a meal for the three of them. She asked them to accept this modest gift, and Qing'er, turning to the protagonist, said that these aristocrats looked suspicious. Perhaps they should unite and fight back? Tianhao replied that although he had just intervened, he insisted that in that situation, they would have been the first to die. She asked, "What?" He raised his hand and said, "Go ahead and see what they were hiding behind their masks." When the guys entered the room, they wondered what those frescoes were. Shen replied, "It was the history of the imperial family." Li Shui replied, "I understand." And Jinyao explained that their imperial family was founded 1,000 years ago, and the creator of this one was also a ruler. 1,000 years ago, when something special happened in the Black Abyss, the imperial family, along with 3 other great families, tried to seal the abyss, but were defeated in the final battle. Her great-grandfather's soul was completely destroyed. Since then, the summoner profession has lost its direct connection to spiritual stones, which is why the common belief later took hold that summoners are a useless class, and he develops over 1,000 years. A summoner with a rank. Tianhao was surprised. "What?" At that moment, the guys entered the dining room, and Qing'er was surprised. So, Tianhao, their target was him. Li Shui asked what they were going to do. They weren't planning to sacrifice him to the ancestors, were they? Tianhao brushed their hands aside and asked, "What sacrifice is that?" She'd read too many novels. When they approached the table, Li Shui remarked that it was still too luxurious here. When everyone sat down, Tianhao asked how he could help them. Jinyao explained that once every 100 years, a hidden dungeon, the Black Abyss Gorge, appears, and there are clues related to that very final battle, and she believes he is the key to unlocking it. Lucy said they can rest assured, even though the Shattered Gorge is at a higher level, but with its help there shouldn't be any problems, and of course, all the loot will go to them. Sheng said that these 3 were so cunning and, what's more, they had shining equipment, capable of passing even beyond their level. Tianhao asked how they knew they had shining equipment. She explained that it was one of the holy lineage relics, part of a cyclone magical omen set, and the most powerful part of it was a magic hat. Li Shui took off her hat and asked, "Is this magic hat a holy relic?" Jinyao replied that they would tell her more about it on the way, but for now, since they had finished eating, it was time to go. At that moment, the guys asked, "Wait, so fast?" The table above them rose as the maids tossed the tablecloth, and a magic circle appeared directly beneath it. Jinyao said, "Lucy," and she stepped into the center of the circle. Sheng asked, "Is everyone ready?" Then they began. Lucy lowered her hand and created a magical light, after which everything was illuminated by her magic, and bright flashes spread throughout the room. A strong wind blew, and the girls shielded their faces from it. A moment later, all the guys disappeared through the portal. When they arrived at the gate, Lucy told the mistress that they would wait for them there. Jinyao asked, "Tianhao, is he ready?" Tianhao frowned, and she asked again, "Does he still not trust them?" She didn't need reminding her of how dangerous their situation was, right? She advised them to look at the situation realistically. Li Shui asked Qing'er what they would do. Qing'er frowned and didn't answer. Tianhao replied that they were moving, and the girls were dumbfounded. Tianhao turned around with a smile and said that since they were so strong, it was better to stay close. That way they had a better chance of survival. They shouldn't worry. As long as he was alive, he wouldn't let them get hurt. The girls blushed deeply and became embarrassed at his words. Meanwhile, in the Golden Saint Lion Guild, people were shouting to the boss that something bad had happened. A message had just arrived that not only had the hidden dungeon, Black Abyss, Cold Valley, been cleared, but the Nightmare boss had also been defeated. No one understood how this was possible. Could it really be them again? Not only had they taken their loot, but they'd also received the reward for the Nightmare boss. He'd come right now and take everything from them. You asked them to stop. They weren't in a dungeon after all, and no one would allow them to cause chaos outside. Shui turned to him and said that because of this Tianhao, they'd failed the quest. Would they really let him go so easily? You frowned silently, when suddenly they heard a scream. A man entered their room and said that their loyalty was truly gratifying. It was the chairman, who announced that he would give them a chance to atone for their guilt with the hidden dungeon, Shattered Abyss, movement scroll. The treasure is an even number, and anyone who enters and survives will gain power many times greater than their current level. Shui was surprised. The Shattered Abyss? But those are dungeons for levels 10 to 50. Such a range is simply unrealistic for them. The chairman said that, according to reliable information, the largest guilds and 4 imperial families will fight for these treasures. The Golden Saint Lion couldn't miss such an event. With their current strength, they certainly couldn't handle the Shattered Abyss. But what good would it be to them? The chairman smiled and spread his energy, causing you to become terrified and retreat. The entire room was illuminated by his magic, and a moment later, people screamed in terror. They were dumbfounded, unsure what was happening, and a moment later, an explosion rocked the room. Meanwhile, Tianhao found himself in that very dungeon and looked around questioningly. So this is the Shattered Abyss? It all looked pretty creepy there, and she said she had no doubt about it. It seemed the legends were true, and Tianhao asked again, "What legends?" She sat down near him and said she could tell him about the legends gradually, but she advised him to use this one right away. She handed him a card, and the system announced it was the Ink Shadow Legion summoning card. He asked, "Is the card so valuable? Would she just give it to him?" She replied that they had it anyway, and no one could use it, but at least this way they would somehow strengthen themselves. He carefully examined the card and shattered it with his gaze, causing a mass of dust to appear around him. 3 incredibly beautiful girls emerged from this dust, to his great surprise and blush with embarrassment. They were wearing nude outfits, causing his nose to bleed again. He fell to the ground unconscious, and Qing'er ran to him and asked him to wake up, as he was losing too much blood. He wiped the blood from his face and said that it was no wonder the card was legendary level. It was truly amazing. But the pain became too great, and at that moment the girls called him master, and Tianhao asked them not to provoke him. At that moment, Sheng abruptly turned around and used Dragon Ascension, Style 1, Horizontal Slash. He shouted for everyone to be careful, and the girls were dumbfounded with horror. Lucy protected Jinyao with her powers, and she remarked that, as expected, he was still a rookie and didn't even notice. Tianhao looked into the distance and saw a sandstorm. Asking, "What is it?" Sheng exclaimed, "It's a crazy demonic hedgehog monster level 30. Li Shui, terrified, asked again. "Level 30? Sheng asked. "Why are they fussing?" This was just the beginning. As the monsters approached them, Lucy began to pounce on the creature again and again. This monster had a huge mouth with incredible fangs inside, but she struck it with her weapon, detonating the monster. When it landed, Sheng entered the fray and began fighting, causing the hedgehog to fall face first into the ground. Tianhao shouted for the slime to attack, and the hedgehog screamed loudly. When Lucy found herself alone in front of the 2 hedgehogs, she used her magical powers and stopped the creatures. Tianhao was surprised. Was that a barrier? Did she really have a defensive class? Everything around glowed with bright flames, and Jinyao jumped off the cliff, declaring that her profession was the highest. Was he so curious? Tianhao was surprised. Could she really hear his thoughts? Meanwhile, Li Shui had fallen ill, and the guys were trying to lift her. Lucy said she understood they had many questions, but the most important thing now was to deal with this creature. Tianhao looked questioningly into the distance and shouted, "What the hell is that?" It was a monster of incredible size that had pounced on them again, the king boar. The guys shouted that it was a level 30 elite monster, and that for an adventurer to defeat it, they would need to be at least 5 levels higher. Was it too late for them to turn back? While the girls screamed in fear, the boar approached them, and Shen drew his sword and began to fight. He fought the monster while Lucy helped him from above. She fired at the creature's limbs, and Jinyao helped them survive. A moment later, an explosion occurred, and while the dust cleared, the monster lost some health. Jinger said that if they engaged in direct combat, it would last at least 2 hours. Tianhao thought that this creature was so terrifying that even the royal family couldn't do anything about it. Shun replied that it was completely invulnerable. She replied that he himself had seen that their attacks were useless, which is why they called him. Tianhao asked again, "Because of them?" Jinyao replied that to defeat armored monsters, they needed to penetrate that armor. While the boys continued fighting, Tianhao replied that he understood everything. The Shadow Army could penetrate anywhere, and only they could penetrate the boar's thorny shell and destroy it from the inside. She confirmed this was true. So Tianhao was the only one who could defeat this creature here. Lucy landed nearby and shouted that they wouldn't last long, and Jinyao explained that controlling the Shadow Army and changing forms required colossal fortitude, and even her grandfather had once been able to do only a little. Tianhao replied that he understood everything and asked the girls to stop. Qing'er immediately ignited with energy, and Tianhao rushed into battle. Tianhao's new assistants began striking the monster from all sides with incredible force, and Jinyao exclaimed, "What? He was able to strengthen the army and shadow weapons on his own?" The monster began to roar in pain and terror, losing its strength. While the men continued to attack the creature from various directions, she was surprised that he had defeated it with a single blow. Tianhao replied that he hadn't expected the Ink Shadow region to be so effective. Sheng asked again, "But that was wrong, wasn't it?" Lucy confirmed that to so skillfully control the Ink Shadow Legion, one would need at least 100 years of training. She said it was just a coincidence. And by the way, she hadn't yet told him that the Legion had a reconnaissance function. The ink from which they were created ignores any obstacles, and this is the most effective reconnaissance method currently available. However, no one had yet been able to master it. Tianhao asked again what she had said. Jinyao exclaimed, "How is that possible? He's already made a map?" Tianhao asked again, "But why is this only the 3rd region? Where are the rest?" He replied that the Shattered Abyss opens once every 500 years, and the difficulty is such that they don't currently have a complete map. Jinyao explained that his legion was still too low level and could only scan a 3-kilometer radius. But this is the largest explored area in the last 100 years. Could the prophecy really have come true? Jinyao glanced at Tianhao and asked what level his summoning book was. He asked, "What the hell is that?" Lucy replied that it was the same starting book that gives a boost to the Summoners Association after registering. He didn't have that? Tianhao replied, "What Summoners Association? He has a book, but an elder simply gave it to him." Sheng exclaimed, "He means he beat the Cold Valley dungeon on nightmare difficulty with only this measly book? Could he really be that genius from legend?" She replied that she just happened to have an extra one, so let him take it. Tianhao thanked her for it and asked, "How do you use it?" She asked him to channel magic into it, and he looked surprised. "So he needs to infuse mana into it?" She answered yes, and he was surprised to see something in the gemstone. At that moment, Jinyao looked at him in shock and shouted, "Master, they swear to serve you until death." Tianhao was greatly surprised by this, and the book suddenly opened and began to flip through the pages. A bright light appeared directly above him, and Tianhao realized what it was. This book contained information on all summoned creatures. He stared at it, dumbfounded, and realized it was a complete description of the slime. So this book really was capable of recording data on all his summoned creatures. Qing'er called his name, and he realized that with this thing, it was as if he had the entire forum walkthrough at his fingertips. She shouted, "Master, is he all right?" He replied, "Yes, he's fine. They better stand here and tell him what kind of book this is." She replied that, frankly, she didn't know exactly how it worked. All she knew was that after the ancient sage created it, all knowledge of the summoner class disappeared after the war, and the class itself fell into decline. This book passed from hand to hand for nearly 500 years until her grandfather discovered it. It was his greatest treasure. He devoted his entire life to studying it and finally caused the stone in the center to glow with a faint light. Lucy agreed that at that time, the old king had mastered parts of this summoning book and was no longer reproduced on the continent. Jinyao explained that after the disaster, this was the only chance for summoners to greatly increase their power. It was thanks to the old king's efforts that the royal house earned respect, and before his death, he continued to search for a capable summoner to impart the knowledge. But since the neighboring kingdom had fallen apart, they sought him out and hoped he would help them. She bowed and said that if only he, the master of summoning, would agree to help. She's the daughter of the royal house, and she'll put all the power of the crown on the scales and swear to follow him to the end. Tianhao was surprised and asked, Just a minute ago they were threatening him, and now they're asking for help? She replied that he was right. She dared to offend him and was asking him to choose a suitable punishment for her. Lucy also apologized, as they'd been searching tirelessly for a successor for years, only to run into mediocrities and idiots. The royal court had given him the conditions of the resource, and in the end everything had gone wrong. Let him understand them. Jinyao asked Lucy to be quiet, and Tianhao asked again, aren't they afraid that he too is a fake? She replied that in hundreds of years, he was the only one to make the precious stones shine and dazzle them with light, and grandfather had said that whoever could achieve recognition for the book would be their king. So, has no one ever tried to touch this book before? Sheng replied that of course they tried, but most were already bound by a contract with a book. Even a very basic one. Once a book is bound by a contract, it can't be completed until the summoner advances to the next stage. She added that they tried to force the contract and only received a life-saving rebuff, and she said that they remembered the summoner associations, which is why they were able to form a direct contract. Tianhao asked again, so he wasn't lazy, but rather thoughtful. Jinyao cleared her throat and answered, no. If someone who hasn't formed a contract doesn't accept the book's owner, that person explodes and dies. Tianhao asked, so if he hadn't approached, he would have already been decorating the local landscape with his entrails. The men bowed to him again and shouted that they were asking him to choose an appropriate punishment for them. Tianhao exhaled and said that he should stop kneeling for every reason. Let them rise, and he wasn't going to punish them. The guys stood up and said they understood. After that, they addressed him as master and wondered if they might ask exactly what was written in that book. He was surprised and realized he'd almost forgotten that he now had a very caring subordinate. She could read minds, right? If he wanted to know, let her read it. First, he needed to test her abilities and see how far she could reach. Jinyao was frightened and said no. Even if he gave her 100 lives, she still wouldn't dare read his mind. He replied that since she had sworn allegiance to him, then let her read it right now. At that moment, she read his mind and fell to the ground. As she tried to come to her senses, Lucy ran up to her and screamed, Mistress! Lucy screamed in horror and shook with fear. In front of her stood a picture of the protagonist and his slime. Lucy asked, Mistress, what's wrong with you? She stared at Tianhao silently, and he asked with a smile, what did she see? She said the red demon had descended upon the human world, and great changes were coming. Tianhao asked, what was she talking about? He'd told her to read his mind, not to paint his regalia. She screamed that she saw the red devil behind him and fell to her knees. Tianhao asked, she's talking about that brat? That brat only acts up, and it's nowhere near a succubus, let alone Satan. She replied that Grandpa had said that with the red demon's appearance, a bloodbath would engulf the world. Did the royal house really exist to support it? Tianhao wondered if she was a damned fan. What kind of nonsense was she talking? He almost forgot to take the souls of the elite monsters, so he pulled out his magic cube and did so. When Jinyao saw this, she was dumbfounded. He said he already had the souls of elite monsters and wondered what the second active effect meant. Jinyao stood there dumbfounded, then suddenly walked up to him, hugged him tightly, and pressed herself against him. She said that from this day on, no matter what he needed, she was ready to go through fire or water for him. Qing'er screamed at her to let him go, and she yelled at her, like a commoner, to keep quiet because Lord Tianhao belonged only to her. Qing'er screamed, what did she call her? Tianhao pushed Jinyao aside and told them to stop arguing. They still had unfinished business. Jinyao smiled, and Tianhao continued, so why did they even drag him to this dungeon of the Split Gorge? She replied that it was for this reason, but before she could finish, an arrow flew in their direction, and the guys shouted to be careful. A moment later, a purple explosion occurred, and Tianhao silently looked at his cube. The guys shouted, what's in there? Someone laughed and shouted that she had finally found them. Tianhao looked at the girl approaching, and it turned out to be Shaolin from the Golden Saint Lion Guild. All the guys were surprised and shouted, what's she doing here? Shaolin replied that they had searched for him. She heard he had defeated the hidden boss from the Cold Valley. He had been lucky last time, but this time, luck would not be on his side. She threw an arrow into the sky, where an image of a skull appeared. Shaolin asked, do you want the Split Gorge crystal? Let him do what he wants, but it belongs to them. He asked, what kind of Split Gorge crystal is this anyway? Jinyao replied that she would explain it later, but this girl is very strong. Lucy also tensed and shouted that they needed to act quickly. She used fire support and started firing. Shaolin smirked at her, took all the bullets in, and didn't even move. Tianhao tensed and asked, what, didn't it work? A dark aura appeared around them, and the guys exclaimed, what? Shaolin laughed loudly and said that it was a clothing-grade obsidian bracelet and that it completely blocked physical attacks below level 50. No matter how good her guns were, they were just trash against this. Tianhao realized that this was Shaolin from the Golden Saint Lion. She looked completely different from before. She raised her bow and shouted that now he should try to withstand this, using the darkness skill, Gloomstorm. When a multitude of arrows flew towards Tianhao, Lucy grabbed her weapon and screamed that her weapon was made of tempered steel and incredibly durable. But this was just a bow with arrows. What would it do to her? When the arrows hit her face, she was frightened and exclaimed, "What?" She began to scream loudly, but Sheng saved her and threw the arrows aside. Jin Yao shouted her name, and Li Shui said that she would help her and heal her right away. Lucy replied that her arrows were somehow unusual, and fortunately, her class was a priest. She had good physical training, otherwise she would have already died. Tianhao didn't understand where she got such a jump in strength. She managed to defeat level 30 Lucy. She laughed and started shouting at them to stay still and hand over Tianhao, and then she would spare them. Sheng exclaimed that she was an impudent creature. He would finish her off with one blow. At that moment, he used the destructive cross-strike skill, and she grinned and responded with the void arrow skill. After a while, her arrows approached Sheng and shattered his barrier into pieces, sending him flying. His hand shook, and he exclaimed, "Damn!" Xiaolin laughed and asked, "Where are those level 30 servants?" Tianhao was surprised that her class was no longer what it used to be. He turned to Jinyao and asked under what circumstances it was possible to advance to the second level of a class. She replied, "The second level of a class? That was simply impossible." Could it be that she had made a deal with the Overlord of the Black Abyss? Qing'er had heard of such a method. Supposedly by making a deal with the Overlord of the Black Abyss, one could reach the second level of a class. But the price was one's soul. She replied that this information would gain them nothing. They would die by her hand anyway. Let them witness her power. The void arrow skill. At that moment, she struck the guys with that skill again, and Jinyao, who had stood in front of Tianhao, asked if she could act brazenly in her presence. Shaolin realized this girl was no ordinary woman and would have to use that technique. This move puts enormous strain on the body and can only be used 3 times. But that was enough to kill her. She used the skill Tiered Shot, which put Jinyao in danger, and Shaolin screamed for her to die. A moment later, Jinyao easily took the blow, and Shaolin exclaimed that this couldn't be happening. She returned the blow, and Shaolin cried out in fear. "Is she okay?" Jinyao asked how dare she do that. Shaolin replied that she was a thorn, that she couldn't save Tianhao. At that moment, she clenched her hand into a fist and ended up right behind Tianhao, causing him to panic, and she screamed, "Sir!" Shaolin laughed loudly and swinging her dagger at Tianhao, screamed for him to die. But he used his cube to throw her aside, taking her soul. She was stunned and began coughing loudly before vanishing into the darkness. The others watched in silence, and Li Shui said that the heavenly veil had been summoned, rain drenching the blade. Thus she healed Lucy, who asked, "What was that?" Xin'er ran up to Tianhao and hugged him, saying, "Thank God he made it in time." He blushed again and told her to be quiet, or she'd crush him. He looked at her chest and Jinyao grinned, saying that a truly chosen summoner, despite such a low level, managed to defeat such a powerful opponent, and that was interesting. Tianhao replied, "And this is the heir to the royal family?" She couldn't even parry a single blow. Jinyao blushed and said he didn't understand. She hadn't interfered on purpose to awaken his potential. Tianhao responded mockingly, "Of course." After that, Tianhao asked how long she planned to hug him. Qing'er blushed and replied, "Okay, that's it, she'll let him go." He had to admit it was excellent, and it was only one soul of the leader of the walkers, and that was already such an effect. However, this time below meant, as he thought, souls summoned from the Netherworld tablet have a cooldown. However, with such a devastating attack, a cooldown was perfectly logical. If she was already so strong, how powerful would the Boar King's soul be? Jinyao asked what he was thinking about. He shouldn't hesitate, otherwise the spoils would be claimed by others. He asked, by the way, she mentioned something about a second-class transformation. What did that even mean? He mused that, in theory, an ordinary person's strength shouldn't grow so quickly, and Lucy confirmed that she had entered her second transformation. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to defeat them so easily. They should follow Jinyao. She would tell them about the second transformation along the way. Lucy and Sheng exchanged glances and silently followed the heiress. Meanwhile, Yu, standing in the desolate snowy place, muttered, "In the name of the traveling bow, let this reveal the scorpion's instructions." A bright red magical seal appeared before him, and Lun Yi and Yu Han trembled in fear. Yu glowed with bright magical power and began to transform the slurry into something incredible. What emerged from this was a girl with a naked body hiding behind her hands. The guys were dumbfounded by what they saw. As soon as she appeared, Yu gave her a displeased look, and she exclaimed that it wasn't her fault. She herself didn't expect this. He extended his hand to her and noted, even after retraining, she couldn't defeat some low-level summoner. What good was she anyway? He squeezed her neck. She began to beg for forgiveness, and then he let her go and said that if not for the contract with the Lord of the Black Abyss, she would have died long ago. He would give her one last chance, and if she made another mistake, it would be the end for her. He created a doll, and she thanked him for his mercy, and he ordered her to immediately go to the place of buried bones. This time, no leniency. He left her and walked away, and she clenched her teeth in rage and swore to definitely take Tianhao's life this time. He and his team were wandering through the gorge at this time. He looked at the stone walls covered in flowers and mushrooms and asked, "Are there even plants in such a remote place? That's rare." Li Shui found everything here very interesting. She ran up to the plants in delight and said that this was the best medicinal ingredient, a bestseller in any pharmacy. "And why is this growing here?" Jinyao agreed with her. From the outside, this flower was worth a fortune, but here it grew like a weed with the sole purpose of keeping her alive. MC asked who she was talking about, and she sat down on a stone, saying that this was a hidden dungeon of the Shattered Abyss, and she was their ultimate destination. The owner of the buried bones was once one of the pioneers in the fight against the Black Abyss, but she fell silent, and Tianhao asked, "What next?" She told him that it was better for them to see everything for themselves. All the spiritual violets here are infected with the filth of the abyss. They are harmful. Hearing this, Li Shui was frightened and immediately threw it out of her hands, and then Lucy handed her a handkerchief to wipe the dirt from her palms. They continued on, passing through a ravine and coming to a clearing completely covered in mushrooms. And Jinyao said, "This is the secret of the second reclassification. And this is how those who go against the Black Abyss end up." In the center of the clearing stood a tree with a woman tied to its trunk by its roots. Qing'er was frightened by this sight and asked who she was. Jinyao approached the tree and said, "The so-called second reclassification is not an improvement, but the result of the Lord of the Black Abyss taking the life force from those who tried to reclassify. She, like the rest of the first squad, all of them became food for the Lord of the Black Abyss. That is why all this abnormal activity is now happening in the Abyss. The Overlord of the Black Abyss stole the energy from those who were undergoing retraining, so ordinary fighters were given the chance for a second retraining. Everyone who underwent the second retraining is stripped of their soul by a demon, and if they disobey, they can crumble to ashes at any second." MC asked, so she knew all this in advance, so why was he dragged into the Shattered Abyss? She took his hand and led him to the woman, answering him, "Of course, to stop all this." He asked how he could do that, and she said that only the hand of a summoner can summon the last bit of spiritual power remaining in the hearts of the pioneers. Then the plan of destruction conceived by the Overlord of the Black Abyss can be stopped. She directed his hand toward the woman. He used his power, and a token with the inscription, "May the Holy Light Descend," appeared in his hand. Lucy said that the first priestess of humanity, Lady Zhang Qingshui, stood before him. He looked at her with a new surprise, and Jinyao said, "As expected, the powerful spiritual gift of an S-class summoner allows one to instantly summon a spiritual stone." She never thought that her spiritual stone would be an amulet. Suddenly, Qingshui spoke. She ordered them to return it to her, and her gaze was filled with wild fury. Tianhao immediately warned everyone of the danger and told them to leave. Then all the plants came to life, and they prepared for battle. Qingshui screamed loudly, trying to break free from the bonds. Energy began to gradually accumulate near her hands. She was about to hit them with it, but just before the shot, they put up a protective barrier and were merely thrown aside. They hit the rocks, and MC asked Jinyao what was going on. She took his hands and told him not to interfere and quickly transfer his spiritual power to her. And he, confused and at a loss, asked how exactly he should transfer it. She told him to just replenish his mana, but he didn't understand anything. And while they were lingering there, Qingshui began preparing to attack again. Then Shen ran forward. He slightly drew his sword, prepared himself, and then swung the blade just as the shot was about to fire, holding a huge energy ball in front of him. He called out to Qingshui and told her that he couldn't hold out much longer. He needed to be faster. There was no other way. Then Jinyao nervously looked at Tianhao and kissed him on the lips, and he thought in shock, did the lips of a beautiful girl just touch his? They tasted so sweet. Due to the overabundance of emotions, his nose started bleeding, and then they both began to emit a glow. That's how the mana was transferred. Li Shui blushed. She told Qing'er to look at them, and she indignantly called out to him, asking what he was even doing there. After that, Jinyao pushed him away and noted with puzzlement that the games were over. Her gaze was murderous. She stood up and extended her hand towards the energy ball and began to hold it, allowing Shen to finally rest. Everyone was amazed by her strength, as was Tianhao. Did she really just absorb his spiritual power? Qingshui prepared to attack again. Jinyao told her that there was no place for people like her in the new world and dispelled her magic, then clenched her fists, trying to clench her as well. Light began to emanate from the girl. She clenched her fists even harder, and Qingshui arched and screamed, trying to recover from the pain. After that, Jinyao turned to Tianhao with a smile and said that she didn't expect his spiritual power to be so powerful. Suddenly, Lucy pointed to a tree and told everyone to quickly look there. All the flowers in the clearing broke and flew toward the tree. Jinyao clenched her fists tighter and told Qingshui to stop resisting. She screamed back and a shockwave swept across the clearing, knocking the girl back. MC ordered the slime to quickly protect her. She deftly caught her and laid her on the ground, but she refused help, saying she could handle it herself. Tianhao ran up to her and said she had already helped him more than she should have. Asking her to fight for him would be wrong. He turned to Qingshui and said that the creatures of the old era must eventually fall at the hands of those who belong to the new. He summoned a unicorn and told the girl to attack. Qingshui looked up at him in surprise, then screamed loudly, creating new balls of energy, and MC asked Qing'er for help. After that, Qingshui attacked him. He was already preparing to strike, but suddenly a white bear, Qing'er, jumped out in front of him and blocked the attack, which shocked Tianhao. Li Shui asked if this was the same protective spirit cyclone from the hat. She told Tianhao that his partner was really very strong, Meanwhile, Chinger growled menacingly and tore the ball of energy into pieces, which burned her hands, after which she returned to her normal form and told Tianhao to act while the defense was down. He immediately gave the slime a command. She rushed to attack and spat slime at Qinshui. Meanwhile, MC, riding a unicorn, rose to the top of the tree, used the cube, and a huge boar pounced on the girl and pierced her body with its tusks. Her skin split, a mark appeared on her chest, and Jinyao was excited, realizing what it was. She called out to Tianhao and told him to quickly destroy it, as it was the demonic core. He headed for Qinshui, but the tree itself protected her and prevented him from getting close, forcing him to retreat. Qinshui smirked and said that they couldn't stop the demons, then attacked him. He closed his eyes, thinking he was finished, but when nothing happened, he opened them and saw Chinger in front of him, protecting him with her body. Magical clots struck her one after another, but thanks to the phoenix's ability, her body quickly recovered. She told him to act quickly, and then he jumped off the unicorn and ordered her to use the seven-colored horn. She flipped in the air, transforming into a girl, and Qinshui stared at her in shock, after which the unicorn pierced her demonic core and quickly retreated. The girl screamed in pain. The core split into pieces, and MC was glad that they had succeeded. After that, a demonic spirit flew out of her body and flew away, and then everything became silent. Everyone held their breath. No one knew if it was over or if something else was coming, and when Qinshui began to move, Tianhao immediately ordered the slime to grab her. But now there was no longer an evil spirit within her. She stood up only to thank him. MC approached her. Jinyao called out to him worriedly, but he showed her that everything was fine. Then Qinshui reached out to his face and said, "He has finally arrived." She stroked his cheek, then suddenly kissed him, shocking him and everyone else. A bright light illuminated the two of them, after which Qinshui retreated and said that this world needed a savior, and it was he, so she gave him the last bit of her energy. Her body began to slowly dissipate, and she told him one last time to go to the forest of the Black Abyss to find the answers he was looking for, and then crumbled to dust along with the tree, leaving behind only a small pearl. He touched it, after which he felt a surge of strength and checked the status window. It turned out that his level had immediately increased by 10. Even the number of summoned creatures had increased to 4. The slime hugged him, and he asked if she wanted to perform a sacrifice for the sake of evolution. She nodded vigorously, after which he used a skill and a magic circle appeared under his feet. Jinyao and the others had never seen anything like this before, so they were a little nervous. Then the slime rose into the air and was illuminated by a bright glow, and when the evolution was complete, it became more human-like. He called out to her in surprise. Then she threw herself into his arms and her things touched his face, causing him to become embarrassed and get a nosebleed. The slime was confused, not understanding what had happened to it, then ran to the unicorn and began hugging her. He shook his head and noted that other summoners had such cool and pompous creatures, while for some reason he only had half-naked girls. Suddenly, Li Shui called out to him, saying that Qinger was really unwell. He immediately ran to them, where she was lying unconscious. Li Shui asked, had he forgotten? There are always side effects after transforming into a phoenix using an immortal bird's feather. Jinyao approached them and said it looked pretty serious, but the imperial family had royal healers. Suddenly, arrows flew at them out of nowhere, one of them piercing Li Shui's chest. Tianhao called out to her in fear, and then Xiaolan appeared and asked with a smirk, did they really think she could be killed? MC was shocked. Everyone thought she was dead, but it turned out it wasn't that simple. Shen felt movement behind him. He immediately turned around and swung his blade, trying to smash the shadow, but his weapon simply broke. Then Assassin appeared, telling Tianhao that she had finally gotten to him. He had caused them so much trouble. Meanwhile, Li Shui was terrified. An arrow had struck her right in the center of her chest. Cyclone tried to pull the arrow out, but she was so scared that she burst into tears and, as she parted, told Tianhao that it had been an honor to fight by his side. After that, she lost consciousness, and Lucy asked someone to cover her while she healed her. And then, Sheng told the girl that he would be her opponent. She gave him a displeased look and called him a bug, telling him to get out of the way. She was not interested in him. Her target was Tianhao. Jinyao immediately stood up for him and told him to run as far away as possible. The teleportation array would activate in an hour. He was their last hope. But Tianhao had no intention of hiding. He clicked his tongue in displeasure and said in a rage, anyone who dared to raise a hand against his comrades deserved only death. Jinyao excitedly said that he had the Qinshui spiritual stone with him now. If he didn't leave, there would be no other chance. He smirked and said that that was even good. He was just about to test his current strength on them. Xiaolan told them to stop acting like they were something special. Last time, she spared him out of respect. But did he really think she couldn't defeat him? She drew back the bowstring and told him to taste her new skill, the dark lightning arrow, which she had acquired after reincarnation. After she fired, Tianhao threw Jinyao away, and Xiaolan exclaimed that this attack was much more powerful than the previous one, and that she would now see how he would defend himself. But he didn't even have to do anything. The slime protected him. She grabbed the arrow and devoured it. Not only did Xiaolan have a new skill, MC did too, element absorption. Having absorbed the arrow, the slime became stronger, and Tianhao in a rage told the enemy himself that he would not forgive her. At his command, the slime used dissolving area. The entire floor was immediately filled with slime, and Xiaolan recoiled in fear, asking what it was. Assassin realized it was dangerous and best avoided, so she rose into the air, and the slime completely captured Xiaolan, who began to struggle, trying to escape. Assassin stabbed one dagger into the ground and stood on it, after which MC clenched his fist and began digesting. The slime immediately began to burn Xiaolan. In a panic, she called out to Murong Shui, begging her to save her, and then her body completely dissolved to the bones. Assassin called her trash, and the slime sighed with a smile and said that it was very tasty. She was surprised to see such a powerful area attack. He's only level 21. Why does he know such a move? Assassin then moved to a safe zone, pulled her dagger towards herself, and said that he really had strength, but he could not escape his fate. After that, she connected her daggers, feathers began to swirl around her, and then she completely grew wings. She told Tianhao that anyone who dared to oppose her must die. He became slightly nervous and ordered the slime to continue using the dissolving area, but Assassin was already prepared for this and slashed the ground with her dagger, opening the gates of hell. A huge crack appeared. All the slime was sucked in at once, and the slime almost fell, but the unicorn caught it in time, and MC rushed towards them worriedly. The slime was exhausted. She asked her master for forgiveness, and the unicorn asked if she could try something. He remained silent, and she was scared of his reaction. Meanwhile, Assassin laughed and said that she had wanted to limit herself to Tianhao, but plans changed. Now she aimed at Sheng. She created an energy ball and wished him death, and he remarked, "A blade can cut steel, but it can also cut a soul." After that, she shot at him, which surprised him, and then immediately drew his sword in anger and told her not to ignore him. He used the heart blade technique, a swift whirlwind slash, getting rid of the energy ball, and she noticed that he was stronger than he looked. But was he seriously using this technique? And then she realized that he was not so simple. It was his supreme art technique of the heart blade, an illusory swift slash. After that, he disappeared from the spot, and a second later he was right in front of her and was about to strike, but she grabbed him by the neck and told him to get out of her way. An energy discharge passed through her hand to his neck, blood spurted from his mouth, and then she threw him aside and said that the game was over, it was time to kill him. But since she was distracted by him, MC took advantage of this and sent a unicorn to attack. She wanted to pierce her with a horn, but she reacted in time and blocked the attack, exclaiming that she did not have time to play with them. She suddenly flapped her wings, throwing the unicorn away, and she fell next to Tianhao. He immediately checked her condition, and Jinyao nervously told him to run, otherwise it would be too late. But he refused, saying that he still had the Shadow Army, he still had the Underworld Palace, so he could resist her. Jinyao asked if he still didn't understand. These attacks were completely incapable of penetrating her defense. The unicorn told him that he had the demon sacrifice, so let him use it, but he refused, saying that hers were too strong early on, and she took his hand, asking him to trust her. He didn't argue and used the skill, after which the unicorn was infused with demonic energy, and she revived, in spirit and strength, stood up and said that the show was just beginning. Her mere steps caused the ground to split. She was now much stronger, and had a new skill called Icy Embrace. She exhales scorching ice from the icy circle of the 8 hells, inflicting frostbite and burns on her enemies. Assassin noticed that this was yet another act of overconfidence and prepared to attack, exclaiming, "One more target, one less, she doesn't care." But suddenly, something flashed before her eyes for a moment. Her weapon shattered into splinters, and the unicorn quickly appeared behind her. MC was surprised at how powerful she had become, and told her to keep using the demonic 7-colored horn, not to give her a break. The unicorn was only too happy to comply with his order, and pummeled the enemy with attacks, then moved very close to her and grinned ominously. Her face made the girl fall into horror. Then the unicorn struck, and she fell. She waited a few seconds to see if she would still move, then joyfully called out to her master and ran up to him. But then he noticed something and warned her of danger. Writing appeared on the assassin's body. She was lifted into the air, and then a beam of light shot from her chest into the sky, and someone's voice rang out. Since she had made the contract, it meant she was granted rebirth in the cycle of samsara. She immediately opened her eyes, spread her wings, and then landed on the ground and asked, "He didn't think he could kill her so easily, did he?" Tianhao nervously noted that things were bad. If he didn't deal with her quickly, Qing'er and Li Shui might get hurt. Then an idea occurred to him. He called out to the unicorn to share his thoughts with her, and the assassin shouted that nothing could help him now. They both prepared themselves. She spread her arms and used Voice of Hell, causing a powerful sound wave to spread throughout the area, and MC immediately covered her ears. The unicorn was directly under attack, but the slime put up a shield in front of her. Pulling herself together, the unicorn armed herself and rushed to attack. She ran straight at the girl, then jumped high into the air, and while she was trying to keep track of her in the air, she was already behind her and grabbed her. Tianhao ordered her to use Icy Embrace. She breathed icy air at her opponent, and her body became covered in numerous crystals, which then exploded along with her. Now she was definitely finished. The unicorn collapsed to the ground from exhaustion. her demonic form fading. The system immediately congratulated them. The adventurer party had completed the hidden quest of the Shattered Abyss, Land of Buried Bones. The system was evaluating the rewards. Since they had chosen the nightmare level, the rewards were doubled. Plus, they received a first-time completion bonus and a faster time. MC exclaimed that he didn't care about their rewards. They needed to get to the city quickly. He ran to Chinger and lifted her up, saying that Li Shay and Shen were already at their limit. Lucy worriedly said that she was maintaining Li Shay's heartbeat, but she was afraid she could no longer be saved. At that moment, circles appeared near her. It was Jinyao's magic. She ordered Lucy to quickly deploy a portal, and she worriedly said that her body couldn't withstand the use of spiritual power any longer. Jinyao resolutely repeated her order, blood beginning to flow from her forehead, but she continued to maintain her magic. Lucy unrolled the Grandmaster's escape scroll and placed it between the magic circles, after which they were teleported directly to the castle, and Tianhao began calling for help. The maids were a little confused by their sudden appearance, but then quickly and orderly transferred all the wounded to stretchers and carried them away, and MC lost consciousness. After a while, when he opened his eyes, he saw Jinyao and Lucy looking at him with concern. He jumped back in surprise, asking what they were doing there. Jinyao, slightly confused, noted that he had finally woken up. Did he even know how long he'd been unconscious? He was surprised, and Lucy said he'd slept for 3 whole days. Is he feeling unwell now? Because she had briefly touched his face, he became embarrassed and pushed her hand away, saying that he no longer felt bad. On the contrary, he even felt better. Then, he remembered what had happened, grabbed Jinyao by the shoulders and worriedly asked if his companions were okay. She looked down in disappointment and asked with a hint of embarrassment, "So that means he wasn't worried about her at all?" He scratched the back of his head with an awkward smile and noticed that her face was flushed and her skin was smooth as silk. So it was immediately obvious that she was fine. She indignantly slapped his hand, telling him not to touch it. The Imperial Household's medical department is one of the best in the world, and Chinger and the others were of course fine. After that, they went to visit them. Chinger was lying in a special capsule, half filled with liquid, and was recovering. Seeing her in only her underwear, Tianhao, as usual, could not contain his emotions. Pulling himself together, he asked calmly, "What about Sheng?" Jinyao told him he was off on another quest and wouldn't be back until tomorrow. He was surprised to note, as expected of a professional, he was a true workaholic. The girl said he hadn't looked at the reward for completing the quest yet. It should be the biggest one among them. If she hadn't told him, he would have forgotten about it forever and decided to see what he'd gotten. What he saw in the system window amazed him. Chinger asked what he'd gotten to give him such a reaction, and he told her it was the Infernal Codex. A book fell into his hand, exclusive, radiant quality summoner equipment. Suddenly, the book flew out of his hands and rose into the air. Chinger was surprised, and then a cube flew out of his inventory and affected the book. Now this item was called something else, the Netherworld Chest, legendary quality equipment. In addition to the stat boost, this weapon has a hidden property. First active effect. After defeating any enemy, you can seal their soul and use it by summoning them in battle. Second active effect. Every 5 souls can be invested in any summoned creature, imbuing it with the soul of the fallen. The third active effect is unlocked at level 10. And the passive effect is only unlocked at level 20. Hidden property. All summoned souls enter battle in demon form. The Underworld Casket is an artifact from the Dark Lands designed to imprison sinful souls. MC was very surprised and thought, deionized form? Then wouldn't the leader of the Walkers and the king of the Boars become even stronger? After that, the cube returned to his hands. The book opened before him to a page depicting the full set of the hidden Lucifer's Sorrow set and how many items he had already collected for it. Suddenly, the book slammed shut, and he became agitated and asked, "This thing doesn't even have instructions for use." Tianhao opened the book and started shouting, "Were there really that many spells in the first book of Revelation?" The evil spirit technique permanently consumed 5 units of spiritual power, which ensnared the evil spirit from hell. The holy water bomb permanently consumed 3 units of spiritual power and combined the supreme spring water in his backpack with the enchanted glass bottle, creating a holy water bomb that instantly destroyed most of the evil spirits from hell. He closed the book and declared that the first book of Revelation alone had 26 spells. But damn, he's a badass now, isn't he? Jinyao turned to him and told him to carefully look at the cost of these spells. They would permanently consume his spiritual power. He asked, "Forever?" Jinyao asked, "Does he even understand what a decrease in spiritual power means?" He asked, "What does that mean?" Jinyao explained that the average person's spiritual power ranges from about 100 to 200, and as a summoner, he already reaches 300 in the initial stages. But once spiritual power drops below about 50, a person goes mad and is forever locked up in a psychiatric facility. He exclaimed, "Damn it, will he become an immortal psychotic machine under the influence of an unknown factor?" Spiritual power that drops below 50 never recovers, and if it drops below 10, he might experience a black abyss summoning. He asked again, "So what is a black abyss summoning?" Jinyao replied that the imperial house doesn't specialize in the study of dark arts, so he'll have to ask someone else. But she's never seen equipment that permanently drains the wearer's personal stats, so she personally advises permanently sealing this item. He didn't think it was that dangerous, and Jinyao agreed to go prepare for the next Black Abyss dungeon. Incidentally, his vice principal had urgently called him back to school yesterday, so if he had time, he shouldn't forget to stop by. He asked again why he was calling him. While they were talking, Qing'er opened her eyes and saw Tianhao standing in front of her. He turned around and looked in horror as an explosion erupted in the room. Qing'er ran out to him, covered in water, screaming for him to help her quickly. She fell right on top of him, her chest in his face, and he said, "No, wait. How did she manage to destroy the medical ward, and how was he supposed to help her anyway?" She sat on him, revealing herself in silence, then approached his face in embarrassment, and he blushed deeply. She whispered in his ear, "Hurry up and help her find her clothes, you freak." After a while, they sat down in the living room on armchairs facing each other. Li Shay said she knew he'd be able to lead them out of there. Incidentally, she'd also received epic equipment. Tianhao scratched his head and said with a smile that it was all thanks to everyone's efforts. He asked Qing'er what she'd received. She replied that it was just a one-time potion, nothing special. He asked again, "A one-time potion? And what effect does it have?" Suddenly, someone entered their room and shouted that he'd heard about them. It was Elder Fan, who had entered the room with Jinyao. Tianhao shook his hand and asked if he was their vice principal. He replied yes, indeed, they were promising young men. Less than half a month after graduation, they'd already crossed the black abyss of the Split Gorge, and it was simply innate talent. He turned to Qing'er and said that she was one of the best students in their school. How was she doing with Tianhao now? She blushed and replied, "Oh, what's he saying? Nothing like that happened between him and Tianhao." He laughed loudly, and Tianhao asked if he was looking for them for some reason. Fan replied that he expected not only to pass the Split Gorge, but also to obtain the first squad's relic. Lady Jinyao had already told him all about this. Tianhao noticed her, then scratched his head in bewilderment and said it was just a coincidence and nothing special. The elder replied that it was no coincidence at all. As a vice principal, he generally shouldn't allow his students to take risks, but this time, it was different. He'd probably already heard the story of the first squad, and the military had contacted him in real life. They gave him this. Fan handed him a special map and explained that the secret of the Black Abyss was hidden in this high-quality copy of the Hell Map. He asked again, "A high-quality copy?" Fan reported that the diary had long since been taken by people from Hell. He saw that many areas in the center of the picture were intentionally blurred. Tianhao confirmed this was true, but what kind of map was this anyway? He replied, "Look at the very top. On the surface is a universal level 50 dungeon, the Black Forest." Tianhao looked at this in surprise, and the elder explained that the government had spent hundreds of years but still hadn't been able to find a way to reach the second circle of the Black Abyss in the Black Forest. So by unanimous decision of the Celestial Empire's military command, he must obey orders. By special order, he, Qing'er, and Li Shui, with the support of the imperial family, were immediately sent to the Black Forest to search for the entrance to the second circle of the Black Abyss, that is, the threshold of hell. Tianhao shouted, "What are you talking about, Vice Principal? The three of them were barely level 20, and he was sending them to a level 50 dungeon? This was sheer madness." Fan replied, "No, nothing crazy. They have Miss Jinyao helping them. And besides, his insignia might be the key to the second circle of the dungeon. They'll give him a rank-up pet egg, the greatest item their school has produced in 1,000 years. When Tianhao received it, he was very surprised and asked, "Are they serious? An angel could hatch from this thing?" The elder was very surprised when the egg began to move and immediately cracked in his hands. Fan said, "Of course he is. He really is the chosen one." This egg was found over 100 years ago, and until now, no one had been able to hatch it, and as soon as it was in his hands, it suddenly cracked. Tianhao asked, "What is this angel anyway?" Fan told him not to ask, because he didn't know either. Tianhao asked, "What?" The elder replied that, given the difficult tasks, the military had sent him an experienced specialist to protect him. He asked again, "An experienced specialist?" At that moment, someone clapped their hands and a girl entered the office. Tianhao asked if she was the one who only wrote in textbooks. Muyan. Fan told him to find the entrance to the blacklist and be careful. At that moment, Tianhao looked in surprise at Muyan, who greeted him and said that this time she was responsible for escorting him and guaranteeing his safety. She offered him her hand and he noticed her uniform and said, "She's got experience." Muyan frowned, asking why he was staring at her. He replied with embarrassment, "No, nothing." He was just amazed to see her in person. She turned to Jinyao and asked when they would be leaving. She replied that in half an hour. This fight had shown her her own shortcomings, and before leaving, she needed to go and settle some business. They would see each other in half an hour. Fan approached Tianhao and said that the future of the Celestial Empire was in his hands. He replied that he understood everything and would definitely do his best. As everyone entered the room, Tianhao became wary, And suddenly Muyan began breathing loudly and leaned against the wall. Blushing, she said that she had finally managed to see Mr. Tianhao. She blushed deeply and continued that she was having trouble breathing, that he had barely finished his training, but was already breaking the records of the Black Abyss time and again. All 17 years, and such a handsome guy too. Now it was decided, Mr. Tianhao would definitely belong to her. After some time, many students gathered in the auditorium in front of Morong Yu, who was demonstrating a spell. A magical liquid and a bright light appeared under his feet, alerting all the students who watched in stunned silence. When a magical seal appeared on the floor, two naked girls flew into the air. Morong Yu watched them attentively, but suddenly became wary when the girls fell to the floor. One of them was Xiaolan, who started shouting, "Captain, let him listen to her. She can explain everything." Shui was also nearby, shouting at her elder brother that this Tianhao was too strong. Morong Yu responded contentedly, saying they shouldn't say another word. He turned to Xiaolan and asked what he told her. If the mission failed, she would become fodder. Did she remember that? She shouted at the captain, asking for another chance. At that moment, the chairman entered the office and asked Morong Yu not to rush into this. Morong Yu bowed his head and said it was his fault. He hadn't supervised his subordinates well enough, and according to the agreement, she would become fodder. The chairman told her not to be nervous, because he promised she wouldn't die today. Xiaolan thanked the chief for these words, and the chairman leaned over, patted her head, and said that everything has a price. She would become the demon's spiritual vessel. When he said this, he smiled, and Xiaolan was very scared. She reacted with silence, then suddenly began to beg him not to do it, but his hand approached her as she continued to scream her begging. His hands covered her face and mouth, so she couldn't speak, and with tears in her eyes, she turned into an unknown liquid. Shui shook with fear, as did Morong Yu, who was watching what was happening along with all the students. The chairman smiled and told the others not to lose heart. He had just received information, and Tianhao and the others were already preparing to go to the Black Forest to find the antechamber of hell. Morong Yu screamed, "Are they really going to the antechamber of hell?" The chairman replied that this was their last chance. If they failed, they knew how it would end. They had to go there quickly. At that moment, he grabbed Shui by the shoulder, stripped her clothes off, and she was naked. He shouted to do her damn job, and Shui cried out in fear as a bright light appeared above her. A moment later, Morong Yu's mug shattered in anger, and Shui told him not to be angry, as she would definitely do it. Morong Yu replied that there was no need for unnecessary words. This time, they were moving with all their might, and were obliged to intercept and finish off Tianhao in the Black Forest. His subordinates approached him, and Yuhan told him to calm down, as he and Lun Yi would definitely handle this. But Morong Yu shouted, "Enough." The men stared at him silently, and Morong Yu showed them the magic seal on his palm. They shouted that they had never met face to face before, and were asking for a chance to do so. Morong Yu replied that either they would bring him Tianhao's head in half an hour, or he would turn their flesh into dried, lifeless parchment. The men replied that they understood and ran to carry out the order. Shui watched them go and said that if they didn't act in the Black Abyss, the Golden Saint Lion Guild would fall under the government's crosshairs. Morong Yu replied that he didn't care and grabbed the document Shui had handed over. He shouted that the chairman had already received alliance certificates from the other 4 great government guilds and wouldn't dare touch them. Shui tried to pull him by the hand and stop him, but Morong Yu told her not to worry, because even if the Celestial Empire didn't accept them, they would have a warm place in hell. After a while, Jinyao and Lucy stood near the statue, silently praying. She cried out, "Grandfather, I'm asking for your blessing so that she can return alive from the Black Forest." At that moment, the entire room lit up with blue magical orbs, directed at Jinyao. At that moment, all the power seeped directly into her body, surprising her. Lucy, frightened for her, cried out, "Madam!" Jinyao swung her hand sharply and destroyed the statues standing in front of her, shattering them into tiny pieces. She asked again, "What is it?" She couldn't answer at all and looked at the devastation in bewilderment. Jinyao turned around and asked again, "By the way, how is the installation of her exoskeleton going? Does it work?" Lucy replied that the doctor's exoskeleton test had gone smoothly and she would be able to demonstrate it in the next battle. Jinyao explained that, as the only A-ranked weaponsmith in the Celestial Empire for the past 5 years, she had only one task this time. Lucy replied that she would definitely ensure the mistress's safety, but Jinyao turned around and said that she was obliged to ensure Tianhao's safety. Meanwhile, Sheng fell at his master's feet and said that this time he was asking him to help his student again. The master said, "Sheng, this is the first time he's seen him in this state since he left the Dragon Dojo." Sheng begged him for help, because he had broken his sword and was unable to protect the one he was supposed to protect. The teacher told him to stand up. This was the treasure of their Dragon Dojo, a white dove. He should take it and do what he must. Shen was greatly surprised and began shouting words of gratitude to the teacher, bowing to the floor. He was greatly surprised when he saw this weapon before him, and the teacher shouted that the future of the Celestial Empire was in his hands. Meanwhile, Qinger followed Tianhao with Li Shui, saying that everyone was ready to move out, but she wasn't even given a break. Li Shui told her not to scold Tianhao, since the dungeon difficulty this time was very high and they needed to prepare properly. Qinger hugged her and asked again, "She's protecting Tianhao. Has she really fallen in love with him?" Li Shui blushed and replied, "No, Why would she? She hadn't even thought about it. At that moment, the three of them followed in silence while an unknown person watched them. It was Yu Han, who told the others to prepare. He whispered a spell, and at that moment, his sword transformed into a sword of incredibly enormous size. Lin Yi also prepared for battle, when suddenly they exchanged glances and looked back. Muyan was there, shouting in displeasure. What were they planning? The boys turned around, confused. Who was she? Yu Han shouted that it didn't matter. She was an unnecessary witness who needed to be eliminated. He lunged at her, but Muyan stopped his sword with just one hand, and Yu Han exclaimed, "How could that be?" Muyan asked again. "Seriously?" She smirked at his weakness and breaking his sword into tiny pieces, declared it was a pitiful sight. She screamed for him to die, and Yu Han fell to the ground in bewilderment. Muyan came closer and told Lun Yi not to move, who drew his weapon, and a moment later, it was dismantled into pieces. He mentioned that this weapon was a second-grade effort, and how could she deflect bullets so easily? She screamed that anyone who dared harm Tianhao would be fed to the worms. But at that moment, the boys made sounds of pain, and the boys noticed. They stopped, and Qing'er asked Tianhao what was wrong. He scratched his head in confusion and said, "Nothing, probably just the wind." The boys continued on their way, while Muyan easily eliminated two opponents. They lay in a pool of their own blood, and Muyan sheepishly said that he would definitely belong to her. Sometime later, the boys found themselves in Morongyu's office and shouted for the captain to listen to them. There was a very strong woman there, protecting the children, and they couldn't even approach him. She replied that only Jinyao and a few of her worthless servants were with Tianhao. What kind of woman was she, and why would they make up such excuses? The boys screamed in fear. No, there really was a woman with a weapon in her hands, hiding it secretly. This woman was monstrously strong. Morongyu held out his hand and said, "Enough with the excuses. It's time to pay for your mistakes." Yuhan cried out, asking for another chance. Lun Yi fell headfirst to the floor to beg his master, but Morongyu ignored them and, extending his magical hand, struck them with bright beams of light right in the chest. They began coughing loudly and screaming in pain, after which, Shui asked her brother if what they said about that woman was true. He replied that it was Muyan, one of the 21 guardians of the Celestial Empire. When Shui heard this, she was terrified, and Morongyu said that it seemed the government had also stirred, but he didn't care. She must gather all the people of the Golden Holy Lion outside, because he was calling a general meeting. Tianhao, does he really think he's safe with Muyan? He'll get to him anyway. After some time, the guys entered the hall and Tianhao said, "Attention, the portal will open soon." Sheng approached him and asked what had happened. Tianhao explained, "His blade," but before he could finish, Muyan began to think, "A white dove katana? How interesting that the Dragon Dojo even gave up its greatest treasure for this mission." Tianhao examined the weapon and realized how beautiful it was. He turned to Jinyao and said that the same applied to her. She called him an idiot and asked him not to talk such nonsense. After which, Tianhao said that her spiritual power was growing very quickly, and that he was even starting to feel pressure around her. She chuckled and said that if he looked at her again, she would return his gaze. Tianhao replied yes, she was absolutely furious, so he asked her to try to dig it out. Muyan, watching this, thought it was a family prayer, a blessing from the imperial house, Dupan, and she didn't think Jinyao would even use such a thing. But Master Tianhao would still belong to her. When the portal was ready to teleport, the men silently and attentively looked upward, then began entering one after another. Tianhao took her hand and asked her not to worry, as he would be nearby. She looked into his eyes with embarrassment, after which they teleported into the forest. They wondered if this was the Black Forest dungeon. At that moment, arrows from nearby goblins were aimed at them. They shouted that they must all be killed, and Tianhao shouted that these goblins were strange, too numerous, and too strong. He had never seen goblins so strong, and that this was the perfect time to test his strength. Muyan remarked that this dungeon seemed to have a very warm welcome, and that they would probably have to wait a little while. At that moment, Jinyao used her magical powers and shouted for everyone to wait. As she sensed an exit nearby, she exclaimed that there were no goblins there, and Tianhao asked what they were waiting for then, and that they needed to hurry and not waste time. Sheng was left alone, and the goblins shouted that he was the only one left. A crowd of goblins surrounded Sheng, who, tensed and frightened, began to run away, shouting that today was not the best day for a decisive battle, and that he apologized, but they would fight later. When Sheng followed the rest of the guys, the goblins disappeared a moment later. Meanwhile, the cloaked men and a girl standing nearby addressed him as Uncle Ying, and said that his people were getting stronger, and that he had even managed to deceive the dragon fighter, Muyan, and Jinyao. He replied that everyone had their own skills, and even the leader couldn't always see through his illusions. They had entered the Black Forest in this fog and did not have a guide stone, but therefore they would inevitably be separated, and everything from now on was up to her. She replied, "Fine, let him leave it to her." Kate laughed at the idea of forcing them to turn against each other. After a while, Tianhao approached a dark corner of the forest and asked, The fog is too thick here. Does anyone know how to dispel it? When he turned around, he shouted the names of all his guys, but no one answered, so he asked again, "Where are they?" Shen was also lost and didn't understand what was happening. He only needed a second of distraction, and he no longer saw the others. "Is anyone here?" When he shouted this, he suddenly noticed a person behind him. He turned around sharply, and it turned out to be Li Shui, who asked, "Sheng, is that him?" Thank God he was nearby. She was all wounded and battered, and Sheng screamed in fear. What's wrong with her? He hugged her and asked what happened and who hurt her. She tried to hold on to him, after which she asked again, "What do you think?" He was scared and realized that it wasn't her, and the girl screamed for him to die. She plunged the knife into his stomach, after which Sheng began to fall, when he suddenly stepped back and used his magical powers. He screamed, "What's going on?" He then lost blood and fell to the ground unconscious, where he lay for a while. Meanwhile, Tianhao was shouting, "Guys, can they hear me?" Muyan approached him, asking him to save her. He turned around in confusion and asked if she was injured. She replied that there was a very dangerous creature here and approached him closer. Tianhao turned to her and said that men and women should not touch so closely, that he was a decent person and could not hug her. She clutched her head and cried out, then asked, "What is his hand doing then?" She exclaimed in embarrassment, and Tianhao shouted at her not to think that she could deceive him simply by pretending to be Mrs. Muyan. The protagonist shouted for the slime to use highly corrosive slime, and at that moment the slime was aimed at the girl, who exclaimed, "What?" When the slime threw the girl aside, she began to scream. How did he uncover her? After all, he and Muyan had only recently met. Tianhao replied that it was very simple because they were different sizes, and that Mrs. Muyan had larger breasts. She screamed that she didn't expect to be uncovered by some little pervert. Next time, he wouldn't be so lucky, after which she vanished into space. Tianhao said that it looked like the enemy would be much more difficult this time. Meanwhile, Qing'er and Li Shui were moving through the forest, searching for the rest of the guys. They heard a cry for help and realized that the voice seemed to belong to Sheng. They began to run toward the voice, and Qing'er was glad that the fog had cleared. Suddenly, they saw Shen lying unconscious in a pool of cursed blood, screaming that it really was him. How did he get injured? They stopped abruptly, frightened, and asked where the swamp had come from. Liquid appeared under their feet, and Qing'er screamed that it had just been an illusion. She tensed and screamed, "Damn it." Her wings were stuck in the swamp, and she couldn't fly. Li Shui was also trapped by the liquid and fell inside. Ying and Kate were overjoyed that everything had gone well, and they had eliminated 2 more opponents. Kate asked if they really couldn't get out of here. Ying replied that this dark matter swamp randomly appeared in the Black Forest, and those who had fallen into it had never returned alive. They should leave while the dark matter swamp was still there. They would drown the others in it too. The next mechanism before this little pervert, he wanted to see with his own eyes how he would drown in the swamp. After a while, Tianhao began looking for the rest of the guys, shouting, "Qing'er, princess, is anyone here?" Suddenly, a unicorn appeared behind him, and Tianhao asked her to help and shout with him. The slime replied, "The Black Forest is so vast, and the fog is so thick, even if they shout, no one will hear them, right?" Tianhao answered accurately, "If they can't hear, maybe they'll at least see it?" Ying said he felt Tianhao right ahead. At that moment, a bright pillar of light appeared in front of them, and Ying and Kate were beaten. She asked, "Have they really been discovered?" Ying exclaimed that his thick fog spell could protect against detection below level 50. He was only a level 20 summoner, so there's no way he could detect them. He clutched his head in bewilderment while Tianhao shouted, "Okay, from this angle, they still need to fire 1 shot, and he hopes Qing'er and the others will see it." The unicorn continued to use her powers, and the slime asked, "Master, will this really work? They won't accidentally hit his sister and the others?" He answered definitely. He had overlooked that. The unicorn should shoot into the sky. When she did, everything went as they wanted. Ying, taking off on a huge bird, said that he didn't know how Tianhao had detected them, but it was better to be careful, so they would approach from above. Kate replied that Ying was still the most cautious. Suddenly, a bright light appeared right next to them, which scared them greatly, and a beam of light pierced their bird. They began to fall downwards, and Tianhao didn't understand. Could there really be a sound coming from the other side? They should go and check it out. Kate said it was that damn fog spell, and he says they can't be detected. Then why has he already hit them twice? Does he really mean to say it's just a coincidence? Ying replied, "No way. How did he even detect them?" He looked at his magic stone, and Morong Yu asked, "Uncle Ying, succubus, how are they doing?" He clutched his head and replied, "Captain Morong Yu, don't worry, everything is going according to plan, and they've already eliminated half the target." Morong Yu replied that it was excellent, as expected of the guild's elite. It would be better if they destroyed them all, but even if that didn't work, the main thing was to buy as much time as possible. He had found a clue to the entrance to the 2nd level of the Black Abyss, and when this was all over, such people should definitely be generously rewarded. Ying shouted back that it was an honor to serve the guild. A moment later, Morong Yu vanished, and Kate asked if they could hold them off. Ying replied that it looked like they'd have to use that technique. Kate asked if he was planning to use that forbidden spell. It would greatly shorten his lifespan, Ying replied that, knowing Morangyu's character, if they didn't complete the task, they had little choice. He cast the spell Dark Mist Devouring Souls, after which a dark aura appeared around him. If anyone were caught in this black fog, their life force would begin to drain continuously, making them prey. At that moment, dark magicians approached Tianhao, who said that it looked like the rainbow shot had actually hit something, and he hoped it wasn't the princess and the others. The unicorn said that the clothes smelled of blood, and that she could smell black magic. He asked again, black magic? Could these really be Morangyu's people? The slime replied, no, something's wrong. The fog around us is getting thicker, and there's powerful dark magic here. All the guys tensed up, and the slime screamed in pain as the fog was sucking out its life force. This was very strong black magic, and Tianhao shouted at the slime to stick to the unicorn and use rainbow barrier. He tried to help everyone, and a moment later, the dark magic disappeared, and the unicorn said that they had managed to endure it after all. But at that moment, Ying suddenly began to scream. Could they withstand his dark, soul-devouring fog? Now they would see how long their barrier would last. The barrier was quite powerful and strong, but a moment later, all the dark forces were aimed at destroying it. The unicorn fought as best she could, screaming that she couldn't hold out much longer. Tianhao asked, damn it, is there really nothing left to do but wait for death? If only they could already know where they were. The slime replied that it could sense their location. They were not far from them in that direction. Very strong and dark magic was emanating from them. Tianhao shouted that she was doing well. Since they had found them, things would be easier from now on. He shouted at the unicorn not to be distracted by the barrier, to focus her magic, fully charge her rainbow horn, and strike. When the unicorn obeyed him and shouted the spell, a bright beam of light pierced the dark magical forces, and the unicorn fell to the ground, exhausted. Tianhao asked, did she succeed? Dark magic continued to spread everywhere, but a moment later, Ying and Kate collapsed. Tianhao approached them and asked who they were and why they attacked them. Kate screamed that he was a little pervert and that she was sorry she couldn't kill him. He realized it was her, pretending to be his mistress and Muyan. Who were they anyway? Were they sent by Morangyu? Ying replied that he didn't expect to die at the hands of some level 20 summoner, but even if he died, he would take him with him. At that moment, he shouted the sacrificial summoning spell, Dark Domain Swamp. A moment later, he turned into a dark ooze that began to attack them, and the slime said that this was the most terrifying swamp in the dark region of the Black Forest. Once a person entered, it would be simply impossible to escape. Tianhao asked why no one had told him there was another swamp in this forest. A moment later, he found himself inside, and Morangyu, meanwhile, was prepared for what was happening. He looked at the paper map and said that everything was here, and here was the entrance to the second level of the Black Abyss. He grabbed his sword and smashed the tree, then laughed and shouted that he had found the entrance. This time, victory would be his. He was confident in his strength, and at that moment, the tree began to emit magical sparks. Morangyu ordered his subordinate to go forward and check what was inside. When she came closer and entered, everyone around was greatly surprised. She said that this is the second level of the Black Abyss. It looks almost the same as from the outside. Even the tree is the same. Is there a leader and brothers here too? Everything is true, just like on the outside. The guys exclaimed, what do you mean? Outside and inside. She just came back. The leader told her to scout the way. Why did she come back? She replied that she wasn't trying to dodge, and Morangyu asked again, did she notice anything? She replied that she didn't know, that she had entered the vortex, and when she emerged, she found herself here. Morangyu asked again, so the problem is with the entrance? He hit the entrance with a bright beam of light, cutting it in two and shouted, what is this? This isn't the exit at all. He continued to struggle, then picked up the map and said that this is exactly the place marked here. His subordinates asked, leader, what should they do now? He shouted that since the photos were marked here on the map, that meant even if he had to dig up everything to the ground, he would still find it. He tried to cut the tree into small pieces, but at that moment, a huge bear appeared next to him. The guy sitting on the branch asked, what was all this about? It wasn't easy for a tree to grow to this size. Could he show a little mercy? Morangyu asked who was there. It was a man who replied that he didn't know where he got the map. The second tier of the Dark Abyss was closed to outsiders, so he should get lost. Morangyu shouted that no one dared give him orders, and the man replied that he had a huge pile of earwax, as he didn't care what was happening. At that moment, a bright beam of light appeared in front of him, and he released a magical frog that tore apart Morangyu's attack. He asked if he was also a summoner. The man asked again, yes, indeed. Did he know other summoners? The man wondered who he even was. The user profession had disappeared 1,000 years ago. The man replied, yes, just a bored man wandering here and there. At that moment, he turned around and saw a bat perched on his shoulder and telling him what was happening. He asked how someone could have gotten to the second floor, since he'd sealed the entrance. Even though the large mouth was to his right, it seemed like he should go back and check everything. The frog replied that it was obeying orders, and at that moment, Sylvester used a reverse summoning. Magical powers poured out of the large mouth's mouth and began spreading throughout the forest, and Morangyu couldn't understand who this guy was. Meanwhile, the guys found themselves on an island near a pond, and Tianhao asked how the bottom of the swamp could be connected to this place and where they were even located. The slime told them to split up and scout out the situation and see what was on this island. Tianhao replied that they were supposed to be looking for a second level without darkness. So how did they end up in such a place? The slime sensed someone's incredible power nearby, and the unicorn replied that she felt it too. Tianhao looked around in fear, asking where it was. He couldn't see anything. At that moment, loud sounds erupted on the island, and Tianhao asked what was happening. An earthquake? He looked and realized it was the user, the owner, returning. But who? Could it really be him? His master? Who was he? At that moment, the earthquake struck again, and strong waves appeared in the ocean. Something unknown began to crawl out of the water, a huge, terrifying animal. The entire island was actually floating on the back of a giant whale, and no one understood how a whale could be so enormous. Tianhao looked at the system, which reported that it was a whale cutting through the waves. He asked, "Seriously? Not the level? Nothing else? It's not showing up. What kind of ancient divine beast is this?" At that moment, the whale itself addressed Tianhao as its owner. Didn't it remember him? It was him, the little whale. Tianhao thought, little whale? Was he given that name as a joke? Let him listen. She was probably mistaken. He's just an ordinary summoner. How can he be its master? The whale screamed. That's right, its master can't be ordinary. But there was no mistake. His converter aura was exactly the same as his previous master's, and he promised he would definitely return. He really wasn't mistaken. And the whale continued shouting that if he wasn't its master, then he was an intruder and must be destroyed. At that moment, he suddenly began to stir. Tianhao screamed that he was its master. The whale exclaimed that he'd known it was him, the master. The slime asked, and he just admitted it? Tianhao asked again, did he have a choice? If they were mistaken for intruders, it would be the end of them. He turned to the little whale and said he hadn't been here in a long time. Let him remind him what this place was, since he'd completely forgotten it. The whale screamed that he was just as forgetful. After all, this was the second tier of the Black Abyss. Tianhao asked again, the second tier of the Black Abyss? Does the dark swamp really lead straight to the Black Abyss? He replied, Master, it seems he's completely forgotten. Then he sealed all the entrances to the second tier and hid a secret passage in the dark swamp. He ordered him to guard it until his return. Tianhao exclaimed, oh, that's it? And he realized how he got here after climbing out of the swamp. It seemed he was incredibly lucky. By the way, little whale, is he really alone here? There are surely other creatures here, right? The whale replied that there were dozens more of his kind, all living in a temple in the depths of the ocean. Now that the master has returned, they can perform the great rite to awaken the power of their kind. Tianhao asked again, and what do they need to do for the ritual? The whale cried out, Master, did he forget about that too? He himself established the procedure for the ritual. Tianhao scratched his head in confusion and replied that he simply wanted to test him, to make sure he remembered his instructions well. The whale shouted at him not to worry, as he remembered everything he had told him exactly. After some time, they approached the temple, and the whale shouted at the master to hold on tight as they were arriving on the island. A moment later, the entire sky lit up with a bright gold and black hue, and the guys found themselves inside the temple. When they landed, everyone greeted their master, and Tianhao waved and said that they hadn't seen each other in a while. How were they? Was everything all right? A man appeared before him and said that the ceremony could begin, and he would please stand before the stone table. Tianhao realized that he would have to continue playing his role. There were only ancient divine beasts here, and he couldn't cope with them. The man announced that the ceremony was beginning, and everyone should set the table and serve everyone properly. Tianhao turned to him and told him to wait. Shouldn't the ceremony be sacred and solemn? What he just said sounded too simple. Hadn't he thought about it? The man shouted at him, saying he demanded it himself, and he hadn't misheard a single word. His subordinates smiled as they looked at him and brought over some strange-looking food. Tianhao screamed, is this even edible? Are they trying to kill him? The man exclaimed, Master, but this is his favorite dish. Rice cakes and sour juice and a foul sauce. Tianhao realized that if he was going to play, he'd play to the end, so he would eat it. He began to eat, and the servants rejoiced at his return. They cried out, so many years have passed, and the master still has the same ravenous appetite. The man turned to him and said that a terrible dark monster had recently appeared in their lands. It was incredibly powerful and was constantly attacking them. Many of their relatives have already suffered at the clutches of this creature. Their tribe's strength can only awaken under his leadership, and they ask him, Lord, to lead them in defeating the monster and protecting their home. Tianhao asked, are they joking? If even they, monsters, can't handle this, then what can a mere level 20 summoner do? At that moment, the man shouted to the Lord that a dark monster was attacking and pointed. Tianhao looked at it and was startled, but it turned out to be Qing'er and Li Shui flying on the monster. When he saw them, he was terrified and shouted their names. He realized they were shadow creatures and everyone needed to run away from here. No one understood why it had come to them again. Tianhao addressed the girls by name and asked why the girls and the others were here. Was this an illusion? The man told the Lord to go, but Tianhao shouted for him to let him go, because this creature had captured his friends. The man told the owner that the dark energy on this body could absorb anything, and that he was no match for it. At that moment, he exclaimed, "Don't panic. As long as the owner is here, these creatures are not afraid of them. If they combine their forces, they won't even have to bother the owner, so he suggests they destroy the shadow creature." When the people saw this, they were terrified and asked if they could really resist the shadow creature. Tianhao didn't understand what was happening. He said he was no match for it, but at the same time encouraged the others. This seemed strange to him, but the monster still flew closer to them. The man pointed to the side and shouted, "Prepare to meet the enemy." The owner looked at them. Everyone silently turned to him, disobeying. The man shouted, "Act faster, or do they want to embarrass themselves in front of the owner?" When the monster extended its huge paw at ordinary people, one of the girls drew her sword and began to fight. She struck the monster with a bright beam of light, and Qing Er and Li Shui tensed as they watched. The monster flew off sharply, and the girl turned around and said that they were a bunch of useless scum, and if they obeyed her, she would protect them. She approached the crowd, and the man addressed her by the name of Lin Yue and thanked her for intervening and saving them. But not everyone could obey her. They were not tools for fulfilling her personal desires. She shouted his name. "Jujing, is he saying that everyone should wait for the master to return? Let it begin." She was tired of listening to this nonsense. Tianhao had activated spectator mode and did not interfere with their conversation. Lin Yue shouted that she didn't want everyone to obey her for personal reasons, but simply that they knew their so-called master had long since died somewhere outside and would not return, and he stubbornly clings to an empty obsession and drags their entire people down with him. He answered, "No, the master has returned." She asked again, "What?" Jujing pointed toward Tianhao and said the master was standing right in front of her. Lin Yue looked at him in confusion, and Tianhao didn't understand why they were suddenly focusing on him. While he was standing off to the side, he found himself in the center of the action. Lin Yue started laughing loudly. "And this is the master. He shouldn't make her laugh." Tianhao felt like she was looking down on him, and Jujing tensed up and said the master had just returned and his aura hadn't yet recovered. But that he was a summoner was true. She should remember that he was the last summoner in the world. Lin Yue started screaming, saying that since this boy was a summoner, he clearly wasn't the master. But suddenly, she saw something and shouted that now she understood everything. Now only she and he could see the master's true appearance. So he decided to find an imposter to deceive everyone. Jujing, he did this to prevent her from becoming the leader. Does he take them all for fools? The people around him started shouting, "Master, isn't he real?" Had Jujing deceived them? But that's unlikely. What if Lin Yue was lying? They personally trusted Jujing. Lin Yue screamed, "They don't believe her? Then let her prove it." She began to use her magical powers and directed them at Tianhao. Jujing shouted at her not to disrespect the master, otherwise she shouldn't blame him for his rudeness. Lin Yue shouted well, but let him know that she would still force him to obey her. Jujing breathed a sigh of relief, after which Lin Yue entered the cave and said that Jujing and the others didn't appreciate the chance given to them, so they shouldn't blame her for her cruelty. She created a fiery dress and shouted that the shadow creature should come out tonight and destroy the interfering Jujing and that imposter. Tomorrow she would become the queen of the second circle of the Black Abyss, and she was overjoyed, laughing while surrounded by the fiery flames. After a while, a silence fell among the people, and they began to turn to Jujing and say, it wasn't that they didn't trust him, but that of the older generation, only he and Lin Yue had ever seen the master, and since their opinions differed, they now didn't know whom to trust. The slime asked if they were already doubting him, so what would they do? Tianhao replied that they would act according to the circumstances. At that moment, Jujing shouted that Lin Yue had always wanted to rule them, and for that she was willing to denigrate the master, and they had even trusted her in front of him. Aren't they afraid the master would be angry? At that moment, Jujing fell to his knees and shouted at the master that the younger generation had never seen him and didn't mean to offend him, so he begged him to forgive them. Tianhao replied that it didn't matter whether the others believed him or not, as long as the one in charge believed him. He turned to Jujing and told him to stand up, that since he'd returned, he wouldn't cling to his old doubts. At that moment, someone doused him with water, and the men shouted that back then, the master had created this world and sheltered their ancestors. His strength must have been monstrous. How could he not return from his attack? He wasn't even the master, Jujing, and they trusted him so much. They didn't think he'd deceive them. Jujing lowered his head, and one of the men shouted that Lin Yue could be relied upon after all, and that she was the one truly capable of protecting them. He would go serve her. The rest of the men shouted, "That's right, if you follow Lin Yue, the shadow beasts won't be scary." People shouted to each other that they supported this idea, and Jujing never thought it would end like this. Tianhao approached him and said that he'd actually discovered he wasn't the master, and that he simply wanted to use him to stage a show, inspire everyone, rally them, and stand up to Lin Yue and the shadow beasts together, right? Jujing replied that he didn't think he'd figure it out, and that was indeed his plan. He apologized for deceiving him and everyone else. At that moment, the people cried out, "What do you mean he knew everything from the start? What a liar he was. Why did he have to deceive them? The master had once brought them here and built this temple. Every fallen comrade was buried here. Jujing explained that since his departure, they'd faced repeated crises. Many old comrades had perished one after another, and now the shadow beasts had appeared, and he felt everyone was scared. So many years had passed, and the master was likely long dead. When he appeared there, he immediately realized his role as a summoner, and immediately thought that this method would be suitable in this case. Jujing hoped to give everyone spiritual support so they could unite and fight the creature together, but unfortunately, his plan failed and no one was able to save him. He apologized and fell to the ground, clutching his head. He asked, "Will they die too?" She said she wanted to go home. At that moment, Tianhao approached Jujing and, placing his hand on his shoulder, said that his master was actually his teacher. Tears stopped on Jujing's face and he asked, "He says he's his student? And where is the master himself?" Tianhao replied that he was busy with important business, so he sent him here first to look around. Meanwhile, Sylvester was inside the dark liquid in the forest, wondering where the entrance he left in the swamp had gone. Maybe it wasn't there yet. He saw a strange beast in front of him and said, "I see." Of course, that's exactly it. With such a memory, the master simply couldn't remember where he left the entrance. He needed to quickly find the next swamp and couldn't believe he couldn't find the entrance. Jujing asked how he could prove that master was his teacher. Tianhao replied that his status as a summoner was proof. If he weren't master's disciple, he wouldn't have received this. Jujing replied, "Stop." He still felt like something was wrong. Tianhao shouted, "What's there to think about? The most important thing now was to defeat Lin Yue and the shadow beasts and protect this place." Jujing shouted that master was right, so what should they do? Tianhao told him to take him to the shadow beasts. He would save his friends first. When night fell, a bright magical light appeared in the shadow beast's lair. Qing'er and Li Shui were imprisoned there. They rose from their seats and looked around, only to see a portal, which greatly surprised them. Someone shouted for his warriors to awaken, and the girls were terrified. When the boys boarded the magical whale, Tianhao asked Jujing if it could transform into that form. "Why don't they just fly? It's faster that way, isn't it?" He replied that the shadow beast's lair was on a nameless island in the depths of the ocean, and if they approached by water, they wouldn't notice. The beasts were very strong, and they needed to rescue the master's friends first, then discuss how to deal with them. Tianhao asked who was stronger, him or them. Jujing replied that ordinary shadow beasts were weaker than him, but the larger one definitely won. He and Lin Yue were both elders of this place, meaning their strength was roughly equal. He replied that they were previously on roughly the same level, but now she was capable of defeating the shadow beast with a single blow, and he feared it had almost caught up with the master. Tianhao asked, "What if she managed to push it back?" Jujing paused and turned around, at which point Tianhao said he could have warned them beforehand that he was slowing down. He asked again, "Sir, did he mean to say that Lin Yue could have spoken to the shadow creatures?" Tianhao replied that if he'd thought to call him to perform a show, why couldn't she have called them to do the same? By the way, where did all those shadow creatures come from? Jujing replied that he didn't know, and that they'd appeared suddenly and that they'd never encountered them before. Tianhao replied that there would surely be some clues in the lair then. Suddenly, he stopped him and Jujing shouted, "Sir, has he really understood something important again?" Tianhao replied that if he knew he wasn't real, then why did he still force him to participate in the ceremony and eat that nasty stuff? Jujing replied that if he was going to play a role, he'd play it to the end, and besides, it really was a ceremony that the master had once abandoned. Tianhao shouted that it didn't mean he should have been forced to eat it. Did he even understand how disgusting it was? Jujing suggested they save their friends quickly and drop the subject. After a while, the shadow creatures jumped out, and the girls tensed. They saw a bright light coming from the portal, and someone laughed loudly and shouted that after so many years he had finally escaped the barrier. This was freedom, and now he would definitely take revenge on them. Li Shui and Qing'er exchanged glances but didn't know what to do. The shadow creatures were laughing and chatting among themselves, when suddenly, one of them suddenly opened its mouth and began to run away. They asked what he was doing and why he wasn't rejoicing at his release. At that moment, the monster's head was torn from its shoulders, and the man shouted, "My warriors, the time has come. Go ahead, they must destroy everything here." A moment later, the dragon flew out of the cave, and the girls realized it was a curse. After so many years in captivity in the barrier, it had transformed into this. The man emerged from his confinement, and Qing'er said that the cave was too dark and only a silhouette was visible. The man heard her and shouted, "Who's there?" Qing'er and Li Shui ran out from behind the wall, and he asked, did they decide to run? He was using shadow magic and they would attack with light magic. But at that moment, the girls were bewitched by his dark magical powers, and Qing'er shouted, "Good, magic boost." A moment later, the entire room lit up with a bright light, and the man was dumbfounded. Li Shui realized it was just a shadow, and the man shouted, "Curse, they still dare laugh at him?" He stopped, and she screamed that all her magic was being sucked out. And Li Shui said that she was in the same situation. The man said they had seen his true form, and now they shouldn't even think about leaving here alive. They would become his nourishment. He reached out to them with his sinister hands, and lifted them upward with his magical powers. The man said he hadn't eaten in so long that he had already forgotten the taste of food. At that moment, Water appeared in the lair and washed him away. The girls fell to the ground, and the shadow screamed, "Who's there?" The water continued to splash and engulfed Qing and Li Shui, and suddenly they saw Tianhao standing before them. Tianhao asked them to be quiet and remain silent. They began rescuing Qing and Li Shui, trying to pull the magical ropes. Tianhao remarked that they were very strong, but that didn't matter, because first, they needed to get out of here. He pulled the girls along with him, and they climbed out. The unicorn dragged them forward on its own, and at that moment, Jujing choked on water, continuing to spread it throughout the cave. When they finally managed to escape, the cave closed due to debris, and Jujing shouted to his master that the collapse would only hold the shadow for a short time, and that they needed to leave. The shadow tried to escape, screaming that it was a curse, that everyone was destined to die, and that he would kill them all one by one. Sometime later, they arrived on the island, and the people worshipped Lin Yue, shouting that from now on they would serve her. They had become disillusioned with the leader, believing that only she could be relied upon. Lin Yu rejoiced and exclaimed, "Good." She was glad he had taken the time to think things over and chose the right side. From this day forward, she, Lin Yu, would become the queen of this world and protect her subjects from the shadow creatures. The people shouted, "Long live the queen." Lin Yue realized that now she needed to find out from the shadow a way to escape from here. She would rule not only here but also other lands. Suddenly, shadow beasts appeared above their heads, and the people screamed, "Why are there so many of them? Were they coming for them?" Lin Yue wondered if she hadn't told them to deal with Jujing and that imposter. The people kept shouting, "Why did they come here? The shadow beasts were coming. Let her quickly save them." It was time to show her power. Last time, she had driven them back with one blow, so this time would be no exception. Let them watch. They will all die now. She swung her magical powers at the dragon and hit it with a bright beam of light, but nothing happened. She asked how this was possible. Her beam had no effect on them. She struck a few more times, but the dragon appeared right in front of her and grabbed her with it. The people shouted that the queen was invincible and she must kill them all. She stood up on the dragon and screamed, "What are they doing? They should pretend that she had deceived them again and leave here." At that moment, she felt a dark magical force and became frightened, jumping to the ground. At that moment, she began to fight these dragons, screaming what was happening. Didn't they recognize her? As their battle continued, she screamed that things were bad and that they really wanted to kill her. Why did this happen and when did it all go wrong? She couldn't handle so many shadow creatures. If she stayed here, she would die. At that moment, she flew up into the air, and people asked where the queen was going. Had she really escaped? The shadow creatures continued to spread and began to frighten the people. People ran away from the monsters in fear, screaming that Lin Yue was just a liar. They tried to escape and cried for help, but nothing worked. The monsters were already close to capturing them, when suddenly they were swept away by a wave and fell to the ground. Jujing shouted without panic, "They have come to the rescue." He and the protagonist stepped onto the ground and immediately began firing at the monsters, killing them one by one. He shouted that these shadow creatures had grown even stronger and that attacks were ineffective. He bowed and asked his master to take them away immediately. He would cover him even at the cost of his life, delaying them and buying him time. Tianhao shouted, "No, if they left, then together." He wouldn't let him stay here alone and die. But Jujing shouted at his master that it was his duty as the people's protector. Only if he got everyone out of here would their people have any hope, and he couldn't let them all die here. His hands touched the ground, and he cast a water prison spell, causing water to spread throughout the area, frightening the monsters. Jujing distracted them and shouted at his master to take everyone away quickly. At that moment, the people asked Jujing, "What have they done?" They began apologizing to him, shouting that they had been foolish, had misunderstood him, and even betrayed him. They continued to apologize to him and beg for forgiveness for everything they had said and done before. But Jujing shouted back that now was not the time to apologize, as he would not last long and that they needed to leave quickly. The people shouted that he was their true leader and that they were ready to recognize him as king and follow him to death. They were ready to recognize Jujing as king and follow him to death, and they would not leave. They would die with him. Jujing was very surprised by their reaction, and at that moment, a bright beam of light appeared from the sky, and an unknown man spoke. "His children, he can finally meet them." The people exclaimed, "Who is this? A lot of strange things have been happening lately, haven't they?" Jujing shouted that it was the master, as soon as he realized that it was only a magical projection left by the master. The projection shouted that he was the master of the second circle of the Black Abyss and had secretly left particles of his power here. But it doesn't awaken without reason. Only a leader, truly recognized by the people, will be able to inherit their legacy. He must become the true master of the second circle of the Black Abyss and protect this land. This power is now his. He struck Jujing with a magical beam of light, striking him squarely in the head. Jujing realized this was his master's power. Now it was time to deal with them. At that moment, he raised the magical beasts and shouted the water plague spell. When he did, the people rejoiced, saying he was simply incredible. They had won, and everything had gone perfectly. After all, they had been dealt with. Tianhao breathed a sigh of relief and said that he was the main hero. After all, but they hadn't even given him a chance to shine. Xing'er said that his finest hour would come in the fight against the dark shadow. Li Shui confirmed that he was right, because he hadn't been defeated yet. At that moment, a dark spot appeared above the people, and a bright bolt of lightning struck the ground near them. The guys looked around, and the shadow that had appeared among them began to scream, asking if it was too early to celebrate their victory. Everyone was frightened, and the shadow grabbed Lin Yue in its arms. Zhu Jing was terrified and begged him to let her go, saying that if he wanted something, he should deal with him, not her. But the people shouted, "What do they care about Lin Yue? She abandoned them and ran away. She didn't care whether they lived or died." Shadow wondered if they would be even more angry when they learned the truth. Lin Yue shouted, "No," and the shadow asked, "Did they know he was only able to break out of the seal thanks to their good partner?" The people shouted, "What does he mean?" He explained that he and Lin Yue had made a secret deal long ago, that he was trapped by the seal, and urgently needed someone to help him break the seal's core. At that moment, he threw Lin Yue aside and shouted that she wanted to rule this world with all her heart, but they lacked both authority and power, so they simply took what they needed from each other. She helped him break the seal, and he ordered his warriors to obey her and helped create the image of a savior. "Isn't it funny?" Tianhao replied, meaning he'd almost got it right. The shadow beasts really were in league with Lin Yue. It's a shame they only came to their senses after being freed, otherwise they would have noticed their conspiracy. Zhu Jing shouted, "Lin Yue, is this true? For the sake of power, she betrayed her master, colluded with the enemy, and deceived everyone? Is she admitting her guilt?" Lin Yue screamed that she was innocent. Her master had long since departed from this world. She wanted everyone to obey her. Tianhao grabbed her by the clothes and shouted, "Is she innocent? She colluded with the enemy for her own ambitions, allowing the shadow beasts to wreak havoc here and destroy many of their comrades. She deceived everyone, took advantage of their trust, and turned everyone into her pawn. And now she dares to claim she's innocent? So everything that came before has been proven false. What a selfish liar she is. And they thought she truly wanted to save them, so it was because of her that everyone suffered and she deserved to die. They would deal with Lin Yue later, but first they needed to deal with this dark shadow. The master had sealed him here, and so in his name, he would seal him again." The shadow asked, laughing, "Do they really think they could do that?" Zhu Jing grabbed him in his arms and threw him aside. The shadow grew angry and screamed, "Did he obtain that man's power? Is that freak even now trying to stop him? Fine, then he'll show them just how scary he really is." At that moment, he infused his magical powers into the shadow creatures, and Tianhao shouted for him to stop. The girls seized the opportunity and tried to stop him, but a bright beam of light pierced his chest, making him even stronger. Tianhao was surprised. No effect? But they had already struck at full force. The shadow replied that he had already fully recovered, and that he had no equal in this world. Zhu Jing shouted to leave him to him and go quickly, because while they were here, he couldn't fight at full strength. When the people turned away, he shouted, "Dark Shadow," and today he would punish him with the power of his master. At that moment, a fierce struggle broke out between them, and the shadow shouted that he was simply an arrogant fool. Their fists clashed in the air, causing a powerful explosion. Zhu Jing was thrown far to the side and fell to the ground. The shadow screamed, Did he think he could defeat him with that monster's legacy? What a fool he was. Tianhao smiled and shouted that it was finally his turn to take the stage as the main character. The shadow asked, "Who else is he?" He sensed that kind of aura from him. Could he really be a summoner already? Zhu Jing shouted at him to leave quickly, because that black shadow was monstrously strong, and he was no match for it. Tianhao replied that he certainly wasn't, but he could handle a summoned creature. After that he smiled, and Zhu Jing asked again, what did he mean? Even he couldn't handle this. There's a saying in his homeland, if he's purified, it means he's weakened by a third, and if he's turned black, it means he's become 10 times stronger. He's the summoned creature of his previous master, and he's the summoner, which means he can make it stronger. The guys ask, do you really want to use this on Little Whale? But he's not his summoned creature. Will this technique even work? They're all summoned creatures, and if he understands the law, then the others will too. Just let them trust him. The slime screamed that she knew he'd come up with something. He replies that there's no other way out anyway. They can only take a risk. If it works, they'll live like kings, but if not, they'll all die. At that moment, Zhu Jing approached him and said to trust him, and if it helps defeat the enemy, he's ready for anything. Shadow asked, why did they even think they could defeat him? He always finds it funny to watch ants fighting for their lives. He suggests doing it faster, and they're also curious about what techniques they still have. He lay on the ground and waited for the attack in a relaxed position. Tianhao shouted at him not to shit himself in fear and used demon sacrifice. A red aura began to emanate from him, and a seal appeared under his feet. The shadow realized what kind of technique it was and was terrified, when suddenly Zhu Jing found himself in this red ball and rose into the air. He screamed that this couldn't be happening. He simply didn't believe it. He rose to his feet and didn't know what to do, and at that moment their fists clashed again. But this time, the shadow was thrown aside. Zhu Jing became incredibly strong and shouted that he felt much better. Tianhao shouted that it really worked. If that summoner had such a powerful summoned weapon like a giant whale, How strong was he himself? The shadow screamed. Could this really be demon sacrifice? Then that freak forbade this magic and swore never to use it again. Who was he and what did he have to do with it? Tianhao replied that if he meant that the summoner had performed a demon sacrifice, then this technique had something to do with him. Jujing replied that it was impossible. He had followed his master for years, but had never seen him use it. The shadow shouted, "Stop talking and show him everything you can," and at that moment lunged at him, but Jujing easily parried it with his fist and again tossed the shadow aside. The shadow, bursting from the dust, screamed that he was lying. After all, he himself had said he would never use this technique again. Since he had broken the promise first, he was also not obligated to be fair, even if he didn't see it afterwards. He could use the demon sacrifice. When he created a magical seal around himself, everything around him lit up with his dark magical powers, and the shadow laughed loudly and shouted that, as he thought, it was useless, since they had already demonized him long ago. Tianhao asked again, "What's going on? Is he kidding?" The shadow continued to say that that magic just now was definitely a demon sacrifice. Why didn't it work? At that moment, Tianhao stepped back and saw Jujing clenching his hand into a fist and directing his magical powers toward the protagonist and the girls. Everyone was stunned and asked Tianhao if he was okay. His eyes glowed with magic, and he suddenly burst into flames. The girls flew aside and he screamed that he was now a summoner too. Qing'er asked, "What's wrong with him?" "It's not him. It's not the master, but an imposter." Tianhao shouted that he had finally succeeded. After so many years, he had finally become a traitor. Jujing asked fearfully, "Could it be that this dark figure has taken over the master's body?" Tianhao replied, "Yes, he's just an idiot who doesn't even know how to use demon sacrifice. He sacrifices the summoned creature in the summoner's name in exchange for power." They both found themselves within the magic circle, and at that moment, a bright red portal appeared. Jujing shouted for the master to be released and not to harm him, but the shadow ignored him and began sucking Jujing into itself. Jujing grew angry and shouted for him to let go immediately, but nothing happened. A moment later, he managed to break through the defense and was surprised when the shadow suddenly struck him in the cheek with its fist, causing an explosion. When Tianhao approached them, he said, "This is the true power of demon sacrifice." He only regrets that only summoners can use this summoned creature. Behind him, a gigantic shadow silhouette descended to the ground and continued to wrestle with Jujing. They both jumped toward each other and another explosion occurred. Li Shui said, "What should they do? Jujing can't hold out much longer. Tianhao is under control and Jujing is no match for him. So now they can only rely on themselves." At that moment, the slime rose above them and poured out its magical powers, just like the unicorn assisted by Li Shui. When these powers were directed at their opponents, it became difficult for them to fight. As they fought, a bear appeared, which was Qing'er, and the shadow asked, "Is this all they can do?" He laughed at what was happening, manipulating the guys, and said that the game was over and that he would kill them all now. At that moment, the guys were thrown aside and a bright beam of red light struck the sky. Tianhao said he didn't think he would manage to escape. He really had relaxed too much. Jujing, with tears in his eyes, told his master that he had returned. Qing'er asked, "This uncle is the master of the giant whale? How sudden, does that mean they were saved?" The being in Tianhao's body asked why he was here. He had said he wouldn't return. Didn't his promise mean anything? The teacher replied that he was apologizing, but he really shouldn't have returned. Everyone realized that drama was starting and decided to watch silently. Sylvester replied yes, he shouldn't have returned, but he also shouldn't have used demonic sacrifice. Tianhao blurted out that he was the one who taught him this technique, and Sylvester asked again, "What do you mean?" He didn't even know him, and certainly hadn't taught anyone demonic sacrifice. Jujing came closer and asked, "Master, is this gentleman his student? He just used his technique." Sylvester asked again, "What? This guy actually used demonic sacrifice? Does he know he's also a summoner?" Now things are really getting interesting. After some time, Tianhao found himself in a crowd of people and shouted that he didn't know what move the Black Shadow had used, but he only remembered being struck by a red beam. And when he woke up, he was already here. At that moment, he heard someone shouting that he would definitely become the strongest summoner. Another guy argued with him, shouting that only he would be the strongest. Tianhao watched the monsters fight and thought that, in this world, summoners were considered the strongest and most common profession. He had finally found a world that suited him, but he remembered the slime and the unicorn and realized that being a summoner without summoning was like having a gun without bullets. He could still use demonic sacrifice, and it seemed to be his main advantage. At that moment, someone laughed and shouted that this trash had come here again. He wasn't giving up today. Today, they would have fun again. This worthless goblin is still alive, and there's no creature weaker than him in the entire city. Across from him stood his teacher, Sylvester, when he was young. Some guy was mocking him, yelling that he could only summon goblins who couldn't even defend themselves, and that it was a disgrace. 3 years had passed, and he hadn't grown a bit, and he should quit and stop embarrassing himself. Since his summoned creature was so useless, he offered to help him kill it so he wouldn't be made a laughingstock anymore. At that moment, a huge monster appeared in front of him, grabbed it, and tossed it aside. He asked, Do they really have so much fun mocking the weak? Haven't they heard that you can't kill someone who's just learning? Fortunately, even though he can't summon, his body enhancement and leveling up were still there, and that would be enough for a little show-off. The guys yelled, "Where did this jerk come from? Does he even know who they are? If he wants to stand up for this trash, he should watch out for getting in trouble himself." Sylvester thanked him for interfering, but it was pointless, and he was too weak to make enemies for his sake. Tianhao replied that a summoner's power is never determined by the rank of the summoned creature. What matters is how they control that ability. It's just that no one had taught him the true way to become stronger. Sylvester was surprised. A true way to become stronger? At that moment, the boy shouted, "What big words! If a summoner becomes stronger through the use of recognized creatures, then through what? Fantasies, perhaps?" He wanted to see what he was capable of. Tianhao turned around and explained that regular summoning and contractual symbiosis were the foundation for summoners, but they weren't the only path. He was teaching him a forbidden technique that would allow his summoned creature to be completely reborn. Sylvester asked again, "What?" He asked, "Can he really master that?" But his abilities were too weak. Tianhao replied, "Of course." This technique was called demonic sacrifice, and it allowed the summoned creature to be transferred to the sacrifice and gain power. The stronger the dark transformation, the greater the combat power. Sylvester asked again, "Sacrifices?" Then he wouldn't learn it. He picked up his beast and asked, "Is this telling you it wants to try?" At that moment, he made up his mind and said he was asking to be taught. Tianhao wondered if he had now become someone's cheating old man's mentor. At that moment, he drew a magic circle on the palm of his new acquaintance, who looked at it and was surprised. A magical seal appeared under his feet, and he ignited, just like his beast. The surrounding guys were surprised. How was this possible? This pathetic, low-level goblin, how did he manage to become like this? Sylvester watched, confused, and Tianhao said, "Now, let's reclaim the dignity that had been taken from him." At that moment, his beast transformed into a huge, ominous creature and asked, "Is this really his Agwai?" The surrounding guys shouted that such a powerful aura emanated from him, and it was much stronger than that of a normal summoned creature. It was as if he had become a completely different being. The main enemy said it was just a shell and wouldn't be intimidated by such tricks. He shouted to summon his most powerful creatures and kill them. At that moment, his subordinates obeyed his order, and numerous beasts appeared on the battlefield. A fight broke out between them, and Sylvester feared for his beast, but Tianhao told him not to worry, that it was now strong enough to crush this little wretch. A moment later, his monster truly destroyed all the opponents who attacked it with incredible ease. It attacked first and destroyed one after another. When all the monsters were killed, the main rival asked how this was possible. They had so many summoned creatures, and some goblin killed them all with one blow? The monster approached him and looked down from above. The guys were frightened and scattered in different directions. Sylvester thanked Tianhao for this and said he never thought they could become so strong. At that moment, Sylvester said that no matter how he learned about demonic sacrifices, he had to deal with him first. He couldn't be allowed to do that again. Shadow said not to think he was afraid. Now he would show off a new move he'd been honing for all these years. At that moment, he spread his arms and began to struggle. Several bloody beams of light erupted from his body, and he became exhausted and fell to the ground. Sylvester asked, "Damn it, he escaped after all." The girls ran up to Tianhao and asked, "What about their master? He wouldn't die, would he?" Zhu Jing asked his master to save him. Sylvester replied that his body was possessed, his true consciousness awash in words of unknown space and time. Whether he would return from there depended solely on luck, but the longer he looked at him, the more familiar he seemed. At that moment, a bright shadow appeared in front of him, causing him to be horrified and shout, "Who else is dissatisfied?" Who was looking down on him then? He'd memorized everyone and was about to make each of them pay. The others passed him silently, and Tianhao said he truly was a genius. In just a few days, he'd fully mastered the demonic spirit of sacrifice, and now his strength far surpassed his peers. It was a shame, though, that it wasn't a good or evil power in itself. Everything depended on the person using it. It seemed he'd been humiliated for too long, and now, having gained this power, he'd simply lost it.